Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District Governing Board to order. Just a few words. Good morning and welcome to our meeting. We have board members participating in person and via Zoom webinar. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation via Zoom and webcast. Before we begin, here are some important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your other communication devices such as your cell phone or desk phone. This will ensure that we don't hear any feedback that can interrupt the meeting. And during the meeting, all public participants, except for board members and district staff, will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. Only the board members and staff will be visible on Zoom. Audio for members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. After each agenda item, the chair will announce public comment. The clerk will recognize any public attendee who has indicated they wish to speak. And now, roll call, please.
Mr. Bessinger,
Here.
Mr. Chiesa, Mr. Couch,
Here.
Ms. Fugazi,
Present.
Ms. Lewis, Mr. Mendez,
Here.
Dr. Pacheco Warner, here, Mr. Pereira, Mr. Peterson,
Here.
Mr. Preciado, Mr. Rickman, Dr. Shura,
Here.
Ms. Shucklin,
Here.
Mr. Wheeler, Mr. Reyes.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I can't hear anyone.
Yeah, I can't either.
I can hear David and Deborah now.
Well, I haven't spoken, but can you hear me now? Because I have
Yes.
problems trying to log in.
I
This
hear
is
the
the second month that
Hi, Amy.
log in.
I hear all of you, but I can't hear the main meeting.
I'm going to text Lambert.
I'm the same. I can't hear the meeting, but I can hear you speaking.
I'm
All
so
of you guys.
sorry,
It's okay.
Mr. Board members and public. If you guys are on Zoom, we're so sorry, but we're having technical difficulties. So
Good.
we're-
I was afraid it was us.
You know, I was making an announcement, but I was making an announcement through the system and totally forgot that you guys don't hear us through the system. So
Aha.
just wanting to let you all know, I apologize for that.
It's okay, we're entertaining ourselves.
Great.
Entertaining ourselves, being fully aware we're being recorded. Ready to go viral. It's nice to know you're not the problem, right?
Exactly.
And
Okay.
thank you, Dr. Sheras, for the reminder, but we are live. And
Yes.
the public is on, so just wanted to remind you all.
Well, I guess I turned on my computer this morning and of course it started updating, so I had to sign on. So now it gives me time to computer, so.
Oh, the dreaded updates.
Testing 1, 2, 3. And then can someone, board members, can you let me know if you can hear me?
We can hear you in Modesto.
Yep.
We can hear you in Bakersfield as well.
Thank you, Dr. Sheras, for confirming.
Okay, and thank you to board members and the public for your patience in overcoming a technology obstacle, and we'll move forward. But first, I'd like to go back to public comment for the consent calendar items, just to assure that the public had the opportunity to address the board.
I see a public comment on Zoom. And Mr. Kevin Abernathy, go ahead.
Welcome, Mr. Abernathy. Are you there?
I believe you're on mute. I don't hear him, so I don't see no other public comment.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay. And that was public comment for the consent calendar. So now we can move on to public comment. This is the,
No, we have to vote.
oh, I'm sorry. We had a motion and we had a second.
Correct.
Do we need to restate that
Yeah,
motion and second?
I think the motion and second is on the record, but I think we should probably start over again with the roll call with the vote on the motion.
Okay.
Because we weren't through with the vote.
Great. So we'll go ahead and call for roll call vote.
sure. Mr. Bessinger,
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa,
Yes.
Mr. Couch. Might have stepped away. Ms. Fugazi,
I'm here,
Yes.
sorry.
thank you, Mr. Couch. Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Pereira,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Aye.
Mr. Preciado, Mr. Rickman, Dr. Sheriff,
Yes.
Ms. Shucklin,
Aye.
Mr. Reyes,
Aye.
motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And that brings us to item 5, public comment. This is the time made available for comments from the public on matters within the board's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda. It is requested that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. The public may make comments on each board agenda item during the time allowed for public comment on that item. Attention is called to the fact that the board is prohibited by law from taking action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda. If you're participating on Zoom video conference, please press the raise hand button on in the participants list so that you may be recognized to speak. If you are participating on Zoom audio conference, please press *9 so that you may be recognized to speak. Also *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And please be prepared to speak when your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number is called. Please state your name prior to beginning your public comment.
Is there any public comment in the north?
No public comment from the north.
Is there any public comment in the south?
There are no members of the public in the south.
Is there any public comment in the room? I see none. And I do have public comment on Zoom. We have Mr. Kevin Abernathy.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Abernathy.
I apologize. I was clicking every button when everything went dark on the webcast and I lowered my hand. So my apologies, my mistake. No public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Connie Young.
Welcome, and please go ahead.
Top of the morning to you. I'm Connie Young, a Fresno resident, retired registered nurse, and volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby, also known as CCL. I'd like to begin by thanking Supervisor Rickman and John Clausen for their participation in a presentation about climate change and air pollution, co-sponsored by the San Joaquin County Sierra Club and League of Women Voters. I was pleased to hear it clearly stated that the district recognizes the impacts that climate change is having on the San Joaquin Valley, and that the district will be updating its climate action plan. This is a good thing because a lot has happened since the plan was created in 2008. For instance, the recently released IPCC report on the impacts of climate change reveals that it has already worsened hurricanes, floods, extreme heat, drought, and fires. and they will only become more damaging and destructive as temperatures continue to rise. The report warns of compound events like heat exacerbating drought, which in turn fuels more dangerous wildfires. Consider that the current temperature is just a little more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than pre-industrial temperatures, with those temperatures just 2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. Siberia, Greece, Italy, and the US West Coast have been experiencing explosive wildfires, including the truly frightening fire behavior of the Dixie Fire, the largest single wildfire on record in California. So, how to slow climate change and reduce air pollution from wildfires? The IPCC report says, quote, pricing of greenhouse gases, including carbon, is a crucial tool in any cost-effective climate change mitigation strategy. You have both the great responsibility and unique opportunity to be climate champions by not only reducing greenhouse gas and air pollution, but also lobbying on Capitol Hill for a federal price on carbon in budget reconciliation. Listeners on this call may also urge Congress to take action on climate change at cclusa.org/action. That's cclusa.org/action. Here's what the Irish say about tackling tough problems. There comes a time when you must take the bull by the tail and face the situation squarely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I have Anthony Molina.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Hi, this is Anthony Molina, a retired family physician and chair of the Fresno County Bicycle Coalition. And I came back today. I was made public comment last month about the potential for e-bike incentives, and I'm back today since the last time I commented. Gas prices have been skyrocketing, and I think I'm feeling an increased sense of urgency, and I think this is an excellent opportunity to start rolling out some information to the public about the upcoming AB 117 project. We have, Earth Day coming up. We have Bike Month coming up, and I want to thank members of the Air Board who have participated with the Bicycle Coalition and passed Bike Month bike rides. And unfortunately, due to COVID, we're not doing live events this year. But I think it would be a great time for the Air Board to consider rolling out some information, at least on the website, about upcoming opportunities to capture some of the e-bike incentives that I think would be of great interest to residents of the San Joaquin Valley, particularly right now with the pain at the pump that I think many who don't yet have electric vehicles have. I would like to see e-bikes added to the list of eligible vehicles under the grants and incentives programs, as I mentioned last time, as is done in the Bay Area Air Quality Management Board there too. So I looked at the eligible list vehicle, and I see motorcycles and such, but I'd really like to see some high quality e-bikes listed on there as well. So thank you very much for entertaining my comments, and look forward to working with you. If there are any clean vehicle events coming in May, I would also suggest including some e-bikes as part of those clean vehicles as part of those events. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Thomas Menz.
Good morning.
Mr. Menz, you're on mute.
Good morning. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Good. Good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Thomas Menz, and I'm a resident of Fresno County. The winter wood burning curtailment season may be over, but the wood burning continues, at least in my neighborhood, on these chilly mornings, with appreciable impacts on air quality and public health, my own health included. We could do something about that. I urge you to extend the curtailment season that applies to non-essential use of solid fuel for residential heating, and to include the use of solid fuel for cooking in the curtailments. Two more stringent measures that other air districts have already seen fit to have adopted by rule and in practice. I also urge you, members of the board, to take seriously your important role serving in this public health agency and to investigate the use of residential wood burning devices in homes that already have access to natural gas. I urge members of this board, as well as members and staff serving the California Air Resources Board, to ask district staff for a public accounting and enumeration of homes with access to natural gas that have nonetheless been granted permanent exemption from the wood burning curtailment rules, homes that were built with natural gas furnaces, have natural gas lines running to the residents, have meters already installed, and in some cases have current service accounts for natural gas with the natural gas service utility. To allow homes built with gas heaters and access to natural gas to avoid the mandatory wood burning curtailments is wrong. It's contrary to the commitment made in the 2018 PM25 SIP and is a continuing menace to public health. And it invites other residents who see and smell this burning in their neighborhood to join in and likewise ignore the curtailments. It is also contrary to EPA's well-considered 2016 final rule specific to PM25 non-attainment areas, seeking deadline extensions. Continuing to ignore that specific guidance is tantamount to a de minimis source exemption that the rule specifically rejected. I would appreciate your attention to this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate your comment.
And I see no further comment.
Mr. Chair, if I could just provide a very brief sort of comments in response to the public comments. I just wanted to let Mr. Molina know that we're absolutely interested in working with the coalition as we had before to look at these various wonderful opportunities for promoting biking and e-bikes now with that technology. So we look forward to working with Mr. Molina on those opportunities, and already working on making sure through various grant programs that we try to maximize incentivizing those technologies. And we know that a lot of the bike shops throughout the valley are also really interested in coming up with ways to make those more accessible. And obviously it's not for everybody, but to the extent somebody is interested in that as an alternative, it's certainly something we'd like to promote, along with other efforts to make biking safer. And there's obviously a bigger context there as well that we'd like to be, as we have in the past, helpful with. And as far as Mr. Menz's comments, I'm interested to find out more, about the specific concerns that he raised, with the homes with access to gas. There's some limited, exemptions available, for those that don't have heat, and obviously, board's always been sensitive to those issues as we continue to implement the most stringent residential wood burning rule in the country. As we talked about many times before, but it's something in April we actually plan on coming back to the board to talk about the last winter season, how it went, the impact of the rule, the incentives, the outreach, education, enforcement. And in that conversation, we always try to tee up, where do we go from here, and talk about potential opportunities. So definitely keen to understand, that, as well as some of the other things that have come up recently that we may want to continue discussions as we evaluate this last season. Just wanted to respond and let the board know that there's going to be a conversation about that in the coming month or so.
Okay, thank you for the comments. And next item, please.
Item number 6, report on District Citizens Advisory Committee activities.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I guess I could just speak freely. Okay. Again, Manuel Cunha, Chair of the CAC. Before you in your folders or in your iPads or in your tablets, you have the report from the CAC from the March 1st meeting we had. And in that, there were some great accomplishments. We filled the environmental justice groups with all of the different parts that needed to be filled with nominations. The CAC board voted, and we now forwarded that to the board. The other items was the open burn was presented to the CAC about what has happened by the board and what was going on, and ARB. So that was a very good presentation. And also 617 by Jessica Olson did a great presentation on what was going on with the different locations, from the Stockton to the Shafter to the Fresno to Lamont, and all of the type of activities going on there and the amount of money that is available. So that was a good report done by there. There was a presentation discussion by Morgan Lambert on the ERCs and that discussion of where we're at and what was happening. And the great thing about that meeting as well, the letter that was approved by all three groups unanimously was signed by the environmental group, the city group, and the ag and industry. The letter supporting the budget recommendations that you as a board did in your policy or in your plan went forward to the governor. It was signed. So I thank Samir for getting that done and to the CAC and then often sent there. So if there's any questions of what happened on the March 1st, I'll see if I can help.
Are there any questions from the board? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the report, and thank you for the time and effort that you dedicate. Next item, please.
Item number 7, welcome Martha Guzman, EPA Region 9 Administrator.
Okay, and it's my pleasure to welcome EPA Regional Administrator Martha Guzman, representing Region 9. Region 9 is a large area, so we're fortunate to have her here with us today. She brings a wealth of knowledge and accomplishments related to improved air quality, accessible broadband, safe and sustainable water, clean energy, and responsible land management for the Pacific Southwest and 148 tribal nations, with a focus on equity and justice for underserved communities. So I'd like to turn it over to Samir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say hello and welcome Martha here to the office. It really means a lot to see EPA Region 9 here in the Valley. Obviously, a lot of work goes on in partnership with CARB and EPA, a lot of important work related to air, water, and many other issues. So we're very happy and honored to have Martha here, and just wanted to turn the floor over to her to make a few remarks.
Thank you, Samir. Well, thank you so much, Chair Reyes, and to all the board members. It's really great to be here. It's kind of like coming back home. I was talking to some of the council members here to just share my own personal commitment to the Valley. And I started off by taking the Greyhound to visit my grandmother in the summer from Sacramento to Fresno. Then I moved up to the Amtrak. So it really is nice to be here. I want to thank you all for your commitment to your communities and to the Valley. I've seen the amount of work and products coming out from all of the work here from the staff, of course, and the communities, and the progress that's been made, particularly on ozone and some of the PM issues. I know it takes a lot of courage on some of these issues that are difficult transitions. And as some of the public mentioned, with the warming impacts and the wildfires and the droughts, it's even more difficult. And I mostly wanted to come to talk about the excitement that I have to partner with you on some of these innovative approaches that we'll be taking, strategies on electrification, of course, on transportation, on our buildings, everything. And of course, in our agricultural sector and our oil and gas, all of the different parts of the economy. I wanted to recognize a couple of things that are before me now that I'm really going to be seeking out collaboration from all of you. This month, I received some comments from some of the community members, organizations on the PM 2.5 plan. And of course, many of the issues raised there are not new. Some of the things like the emissions inventory that have been constant critiques are things that I'm reviewing. As an example, they asked for us to review the role of ammonia in the formation of PM 2.5. And I just want to be really transparent about those things as I seek further comment and really ideas about how to make progress in these areas. And of course, your advocacy to us as EPA and for us to do our job. As early as yesterday, Samir was again calling for greater action on our heavy duty rules for trucks. I'm very happy that we finally put out our our proposed rules there on March 7th. And of course, it's one step to zero emission. It is going to impact the emission reductions on heavy duty for the 2027 model year. But we're continuing. We have a directive from our president to actually move forward with even more ambitious goals after that. But really look forward in doing our part to this very ambitious goals that we have. But most of all, I just wanted to be here. It won't be my last time here. There's so many issues, and as the chairman mentioned, we do at EPA so many broad issues. Air is one of our top issues, of course, air and climate, and as well water, wastewater, all of the different water issues that are really important, particularly in the Valley. But excited about the opportunity to partner and really looking at a tremendous amount of funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law to invest in these areas. And I want to make sure those investments come to the Valley. So thank you for having me. I will stick around for a little bit, but I'm going to continue with my visits, going out to Mendota next. Was in Stockton yesterday. And as I said, I'll be back, and I look forward to some of those partnership areas that we can really continue to make progress on. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I appreciate you being here at the meeting and look forward to future conversations and working with you in the future. And I see that Supervisor Chiesa would like to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm not sure how I refer to you. You're the administrator, right? And that's always a tough word. So I'm going to call you director. How's that, or boss? You'll be our boss. But I appreciate you taking time truly to come visit the Valley. I know you have some roots around here, but it is a different place. Until you visit, again, all the way from San Joaquin down to Kern, you realize that on air quality, we've got some attainment issues, but it's constricted by a lot of other outside sources. We have the north-south I-5 and 99 movement of goods and services, and that's why Samir is always talking about truck rules. If you look at Cal Enviro screen, we have a very impacted area. So music to my ears that you want to invest money in the Valley, and we're the right place. Again, because it's unique, I think that the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control will do a better job than having CARB or EPA determine things. I think if we're going to meet our goal, it's going to take money and it's going to take a partnership. And so I look forward to working with you, and I know the rest of the board does too.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chiesa. He also serves as our Vice Chair, so appreciate his comments. And again, thank you for your time this morning and for coming to meet us, and look forward to future conversations.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 8, receive update on attainment planning efforts for federal particulate and ozone standards.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce Jessie Fierro, Director of Air Quality Planning, for her inaugural, but not really, a presentation on plans and rules. But inaugural in that it's her first in this director role, but you've obviously seen her, for many years presenting on related issues. So I'm going to turn the mic over to her to walk the board and the public through where we are on our upcoming plans.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. It's wonderful to see you all this morning and provide an update on our air quality planning efforts. Where is the clicker? Do you have it? Thank you. Now, some of you might be having a little deja vu. Didn't we just have an update on planning efforts? You guys get these updates pretty frequently, but there's really good reasons for this. One of the good reasons is that these air quality plans are extremely important. They really are the primary vehicle for improving air quality in the San Joaquin Valley. But another reason why we like to give you these updates frequently is because the effort is ongoing. And each plan is really building on all the plans that came before it, because we are constantly in collaboration frequently with CARB and EPA, reviewing our emissions inventory, reviewing opportunities to improve control measures, right? That work never stops. The attainment plans are the checkpoint where you see the fruition of all that work come together. And you'll be getting such a document in summer of 2022, specifically for one of our ozone standards. But that work that's going on right now, it builds upon all the plans that we've done in the past. So we bring a lot of knowledge and a lot of acknowledgement of the work that needs to go on for all of these scientific and technological endeavors. And then after we adopt the plan, the work continues, because we must implement the plan by adopting all the control measure commitments that the plans contain. So as I mentioned, each plan is just a checkpoint of all the ongoing work. So today, I'm specifically updating you primarily on the ozone and particulate matter plans. For a frame of reference, you guys, and again, you guys have had these presentations before, but if you need a reference, I have a chart here that shows you some of the air quality, well, most of the ozone and particulate matter standards that EPA has adopted over the years. There are additional standards for other pollutants, but ozone and PM is what I'm focusing on today. The Clean Air Act prompts EPA to periodically review these health-based standards, establish standards, designate non-attainment areas, promulgate planning requirements, and then act on the state implementation plans by deadlines specified in the Clean Air Act. So throughout the presentation, I might reference how a certain plan applies to a certain standard. And so if you need to reference which standard I'm talking about, you have this nice table here on slide number 3. But of course, anything we do for any of those plans are going to help us for each of these standards for a couple of reasons. One is that within the ozone world, the standards are getting more stringent. They're getting more challenging, but the things we do under the earlier standards all contribute to getting us closer to the tighter standards. The other reason why there's a lot of synergy between these efforts is for the San Joaquin Valley, it really comes down to NOx, oxides of nitrogen reductions, because NOx reductions contribute to both ozone and particulate matter improvement. And you'll see that in some of my charts in a little bit. When I say we are building upon previous plans, I just wanted to prove to you that they do exist. Here's a list of several of them. It's not a complete list. It's most of them. I realize we're missing a couple from the 90s. There was a 2004 one-hour ozone plan. We had a 2007 PM10 maintenance plan. But these are most of the major SIPs that your board has adopted over the past almost 2 decades. So today, though, I will be focusing the rest of my discussion mostly on the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, just to give you an update on where we are implementing that plan, and then the plan that you will be approving, or well, considering, hopefully approving, later on in 2022. So let me tell you where we are for the PM 2.5 plan. Oh, but before I do that, let me talk to you about the implementation phase of these plans. So as I mentioned, when we adopt a plan, then the work that goes on is really based on the control measure development, adopting regulations, in our case, many amendments of regulations over the years. This board has adopted nearly 650 stringent rules and regulations and amendments. And through those efforts, those control requirements ratcheting down over the past 3 decades, stationary source emissions have been reduced by 90%, and stationary sources are primarily where our regulatory authority lies. So we've really made tremendous progress over the decades through the partnership with the Valley communities and businesses investing in cleaner technologies and complying with those rules. We've had really great success through that, and that's why we're getting very close to some of these standards. CARB, the California Air Resources Board, has also adopted numerous mobile source emission control regulations and strategies. The Air District district doesn't have direct authority over tailpipe emissions. CARB has some authority, and then EPA has some authority. So CARB, it really leads the nation on getting really important emissions reductions from our mobile sources. So the district and CARB efforts combined really represent the nation's toughest emissions control program, which is very important for an area like ours because of the extent of the air quality challenge that we do have. We go above and beyond our regulations, of course, through our incentive program, through which we're able to expedite the adoption of cleaner technologies. We've spent over $4.2 billion in public and private investment over the years and gotten really significant emissions reductions through that as well. So through these significant clean air investments, we continue to make major improvements with respect to air quality. In terms of the specific control measures, your board adopted the 2018 PM 2.5 plan that actually very ambitiously dealt with all three of the PM 2.5 standards. And through that plan, you have already fulfilled most of the commitments in that plan by adopting amendments to most of the rules that you see here. In total, the emissions reduction stemming from these efforts surpasses the commitment in the plan. So that's really good news that we are already achieving more emissions reductions than the minimum we committed to in that plan. The one rule we have not completed yet is the one at the bottom, Rule 4550, conservation management practices. The district held a public scoping meeting in December of 2021, and we're going to be holding additional meetings and workshops for the remainder of 2022, and we'll have additional updates for your board as that project continues. As a result of those control measure adoption efforts, we have seen tremendous progress in improving Valley particulate matter, PM 2.5. If you look back on slide 3, when I have all the different particulate matter standards, you'll recall that particulate matter each year actually has two parts of the standard. There's an annual standard that averages PM 2.5 over the entire year. And then there's a 24-hour standard that looks at the peak values that average throughout the course of a day. And we're seeing progress on both of those. This chart shows you how in 2003, those red and purple areas were not attaining the standards. On the left, you see the 24-hour averages, and on the right, you see the annual averages. But in 2020, there's no more purple areas. The red areas are very, very minimal, and we are on track to attain the standards in 2024 and 2025 as shown on these maps. So this is a good visual to show you the results of all the efforts that are being made in the Valley to improve PM 2.5 air quality. One remaining issue for PM 2.5, though, relates to contingency measures. And so I did want to note that EPA has approved or proposed approval of our PM 2.5 plan with respect to the 2006 and the 2012 PM 2.5 standards. They're still reviewing the components of the plan that relate specifically to the 1997 standard. But when I say they've approved the plan, there is one notable exception, and the exception that they have not approved is contingency measures. This is a significant issue for our region and many other regions. So we're tracking this very closely, and you have the dates here. Is within the past few months, really, that we've gotten final disapprovals or proposed disapprovals on the contingency measures. Now, what am I even talking about here? The Clean Air Act requires an attainment plan to have contingency measures, the backup plan, that would be implemented if an area has a failure to meet an attainment date or a failure to meet a progress milestone somewhere along the way. EPA would then act to say, oh, you failed to meet this milestone or a deadline, you must implement your contingency measures. So it's that backup plan that you have ready to go just in case you need it. But contingency, it sounds great in theory. In practice, the implementation of this is extremely challenging for several reasons. One is just the nature of when you're in a non-attainment area that has challenges under multiple NACs. If you're looking ahead and realizing I need all the emissions reductions I need, all the reductions I can get, looking at this sequence of increasingly stringent and increasingly health protective standards, I don't want to hold anything back as backup. I want to implement everything I can so I can improve public health for all my environmental justice areas and for my region as a whole. And yet the very nature of contingency measures requires you to hold something back. So that's one really important challenge. Another challenge is that we are already implementing the most stringent stationary and mobile source emissions requirements. So really, we're not holding back anyway. So that's another challenge. Another big challenge is that a contingency measure under the law is currently implemented. You need something called a contingency trigger, and I'll talk about that more on the next slide. But just spoiler alert, it's really not feasible for most control technologies. And then the fourth reason is there's simply a scarcity of measures that meet this highly restrictive contingency definition. So certainly we can look at the fact that EPA has this series of disapprovals, but it's not for lack of interest or lack of trying. It is really hard to come up with sufficient measures that actually meet that legal definition. And really part of the problem is that interpretation of this requirement has changed in recent years due to litigation. One issue is that a contingency measure can only be enacted if the area fails to meet an attainment date or some other milestone. So you need something called a contingency trigger. And that means that your rule is fully adopted, but it's not implemented yet, but it will implement automatically if there's a triggering action from EPA. This works pretty well in something like our fireplace rule, where you can simply say, okay, well, if there's a trigger, we'll just lower our no burn threshold, and suddenly our forecasters know to call more no burn days. That sort of trigger mechanism doesn't really work for something that's technology driven. You can't tell everyone, oh, okay, everyone go buy a new boiler now. It just isn't feasible for technologies, this trigger idea. So it's not impossible, but it's very limited to have a measure that meets that trigger definition. Contingency measures can't be surplus reductions from already implemented measures. This came from it's called the Barr case, where in Arizona, they had their contingency measure was going to be deploying new PM10 efficient street sweepers, but when they needed a measure, they had already deployed them. And so the Ninth Circuit Court said, well, that's not a contingency measure if you already did it. Arizona was thinking, oh, I'm going to expedite my benefits. And the Ninth Circuit Court said, that's not a contingency measure. So that's a huge challenge. Another big challenge as if that weren't enough, another big challenge for contingency measures is just the amount of measures you need. EPA guidance requires 1 year's worth of RFP. This varies from plan to plan, but it is a significant amount of emissions reductions. It is just guidance, so that's comforting. But from a recent Ninth Circuit case from the Association of Irritated Residents, the Ninth Circuit Court said that you can't ignore that guidance without a reasoned explanation. And so we need to do a lot more work. EPA and our agencies need to do a lot more work documenting what is a good amount of contingency measures given the totality of circumstances. The one good thing that came out of this air case is that the Ninth Circuit Court did recognize the importance of creativity in your plans. And they said enhanced enforcement, which was a component of that case, and other measures could be approvable as plan options. So moving forward to try to figure out how can we meet this really difficult legal test is it is going to require significant analysis, a lot of innovation, outreach, and really a lot of interagency coordination. So we look forward to working with EPA on this matter. We look forward to working with CARB to try to craft a suite of measures that meet the spirit and the legal intent of contingency measures while not shortchanging our efforts to expedite improved air quality for our environmental justice groups and for our region as a whole. I've been talking about this mostly in the context of the PM 2.5 plan because that's where the disapprovals come from, but I assure you this is also an issue for our ozone plan. So we're going to be working on these concepts in the 2022 ozone plan as well. So as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, every plan we do builds upon prior plans, and the 2022 ozone plan is no exception. We are building upon the work that's already been done through our 2007 ozone plan and our 2016 ozone plan. This time we're addressing the 2015 NAAQS, which is the most stringent of the three standards. We know that we've done a lot to reduce emissions already. We know ozone air quality is improving, but we do need additional reductions if we're going to meet those federal standards and protect public health. So it's going to take a concerted effort by the district, CARB, and EPA for all of our agencies to identify additional measures for the sources under our control and funding for transformational transitions to new technologies. So the work must continue. Over 80% of the NOx emissions, and I mentioned NOx is important for ozone and particulate matter, over 80% of the NOx emissions come from mobile sources, which are under state and federal jurisdiction. Your board has already done a lot for this 2015 ozone standard. We've already addressed the initial federal requirements of the RACT SIP, the reasonably available control technology demonstration, and the emission statement program certification and clean fuels for boilers certification. So there are several remaining elements that you will be seeing later on in this year with the 2022 Ozone Plan, including a thorough counting of the emissions in our region, air quality modeling, and additional technical analyses to establish what's called our carrying capacity. What is the targets, the emissions reductions targets that we need to meet to attain that standard, a thorough control measure analysis, additional economic and technologically feasible controls to expedite attainment and expedite air quality benefits, contingency measures, hopefully, and other federal requirements. This chart shows you the benefits we are already going to see in the coming years from the control measures that have already been adopted. So it starts from the base year for the plan that is 2017, and that's the year from which all the analysis in the plan is going to stem for this 2017 base year, the emissions inventory and the photochemical modeling. And then we project out to our attainment deadline of 2037. This chart shows you that through the things we've already adopted, emissions are decreasing quite a bit between now and 2037. And I'll tell you, sometimes still, I think, is this chart right? Because the last time I worked on the plan, the 2007 Ozone Plan, our total emissions were over 400 tons per day. The fact that we're already at like below 200 just blows my mind sometimes. And that's really encouraging, but it also means it's harder and harder to get those emissions reductions that we need. But through the controls already adopted, we're seeing significant reductions. And as a result, our ambient air quality is also improving. And this chart shows you how our ozone design value, that's the average that it represents the attainment test for whether or not you've reached the standard. And we are seeing a really significant downward trend. The emissions reductions are working. The control measures, the incentives, the interagency partnerships are getting real measured air quality benefits, and it is continuing through this downward trend. And this goes all the way out through 2021. You do see the trend creep up when you include data impacted by wildfires, but under EPA policy, when air quality data is affected by wildfires, it is not considered toward your attainment test and your modeling demonstration. So that's what this shows here. So the initial modeling analysis is pretty promising. So far, the modeling analysis that CARB is doing and that the district is reviewing and commenting on and contributing to finds that we are getting, the modeling shows that with the control measures we've already adopted, that we are getting very, very close to 2037. And so CARB included emissions reductions from recently adopted rules. CARB is also evaluating the benefits of their current control strategy as well as their new commitments that they released recently through their 2022 state SIP strategy. I'll tell you more specifics on that in a moment. And then, of course, building on all of the work that's already been done under the other plans. The initial modeling assessment does indicate that the Valley will attain the 2015 ozone standard by the 2037 deadline. And we're continuing to refine this analysis over the coming months. The state strategy that CARB has been working on, they posted a draft on January 31st of 2022. I have a link there if you want to look into it later. They hosted a public workshop to discuss this strategy in mid-February and presented the strategy to their board in late February. And CARB also presented their strategy at our ozone plan workshop on May 7th, 2022. The state strategy really focuses on the San Joaquin Valley and South Coast because that's where the greatest air quality needs are. But they also achieve significant emissions reductions that are needed statewide. And really, when we talk about the need for state and federal action, it is a little selfish because I know we need it for the San Joaquin Valley very much, but the benefits, of course, extend beyond San Joaquin Valley. There are other parts of the state and other parts of the nation that also need these emissions reductions so that their air quality can improve as well. The state SIP focuses on NOx reductions since VOC reductions are less effective in reducing ozone in California. That's not true all over the nation, but it is true here. We have the science and the modeling to support that. The state SIP strategy, proposed strategy, transitions away from combustion to reduce emissions to levels the modeling predicts will support attainment of the 2015 standard by 2037. They have a fairly aggressive implementation schedule. And also there's a lot of co-benefits in CARB's state's proposed strategy for their climate change efforts and their community risk reduction goals. So there's a lot of good things that could come about from this state strategy. This summarizes the things that they're looking at. You see a lot of mobile source regulations on here, which is appropriate because that is what they regulate and we can't. So they are proposing reductions for the on-road sources like zero emission trucks, off-road sources listed here. And they are also looking to encourage the federal EPA to do their fair share to reduce emissions from mobile sources under their regulatory authority as well. Federal action is really critical. We say that a lot. The district says that a lot. CARB says that a lot. Well, here's some data to back it up and show you why federal action is so important. This chart does show statewide mobile source emissions, and it shows how those emissions that are under California regulatory authority are decreasing significantly from the year 2000 out through the year 2040. The federal side of this, they did show some reduction between the year 2000 and about the year 2015, but it's really flatlined. There hasn't been a lot of progress as far as reducing emissions from federal sources. And there comes a point right about now, in fact, where the federal sources outpace state sources in terms of the amount of emissions that are going into California. And so this data really shows that California needs EPA's help to reduce the emissions that are occurring in the states. And we're very excited that it looks like that help that we're seeking is indeed on the way, as Administrator Guzman mentioned earlier today. EPA has proposed a rulemaking for clean trucks. Your board has advocated for federal agencies to do their fair share to reduce emissions from sources under their regulatory authority. We submitted a petition for stronger national truck standards in 2016. It's really critical for reducing emissions from interstate trucks. So even though California has done a lot to reduce emissions from California registered mobile sources, California can't regulate motor vehicles that aren't registered in California. So the EPA measures are going to do a lot for all the interstate trucks traveling through California to reduce those emissions, which are a significant portion of the emissions that are happening in California. EPA has proposed two options in the clean truck rule that they posted earlier this month. Option one has a two-step phase-in, so there would be requirements for the 2027 through 2030 model year, and then different requirements for the 2031 onward model year. Option two just has one phase. It's 2027 and onward is going to have a set of requirements to meet. So they're going to be accepting comments on these options, and I should note that CARB's current state requirements are more stringent than both proposed options. But again, that doesn't mean that this won't help. This will absolutely help the Valley because of the interstate trucks that are traveling through our region and throughout the state. So we are closely tracking this rulemaking and will continue to advocate for the needed reductions that the San Joaquin Valley needs to meet the attainment deadlines before us. So for the 2022 Ozone Plan, we've been having public engagement on this plan for a couple of years already. You've had numerous updates to your board as shown on this table. Today's just the latest of those. We've been providing technical work group public meetings. We just had one on March 7th. In fact, gosh, that was a week and a half ago. It seems like longer ago, but it was just a couple weeks ago. We plan to hold an additional public workshop in April, and then we hope to present the plan to your board for adoption in summer of 2022. I do want to note one other, type of effort that we're working on is maintenance plans. A maintenance plan is the plan that you put together when you've reached a standard. So maintenance plans are really good news. They're a little bit different from attainment plans, but there is a little bit of overlap in the kind of content that they include. But we do plan on developing some maintenance plans in the near future. We adopted a PM10 maintenance plan back in 2007, and we are required to update that. So we are working on an update to the PM10 maintenance plan. We're also looking at putting together a maintenance plan for the 1-hour ozone standard. So we have attained that standard, and that's great news. And we want to formalize that process with a maintenance plan. Also, the 1997 PM 2.5 standard. We believe that the latest data shows that we've attained that standard, and we look forward to putting together a maintenance plan for that standard soon as well. And we're going to keep an eye on things. Hopefully, we'll have lots of maintenance plans for you in the near future, because we're just going to attain all these standards with all the good work that's continuing to reduce emissions. So that concludes my presentation, and we'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. Very engaging presentation. Thank you for that. And I see that Supervisor Mendez would like to make a comment.
Yeah, I'm going to start off by saying I was very impressed with your presentation.
Thank you.
Anybody that can speak as long as you did without taking a breath and not reading it, and actually you kept throwing information out that wasn't in the presentation. I was very impressed.
Thank you.
Especially for the first time you've done this presentation. So you're starting out way high here. I got a couple questions. One, I know it's not in our plan. We can't regulate it. I don't even know how much the federal government can regulate it, but the railroads and the amount of pollution they put in, have you guys calculated what they're doing in terms of total pollution in our area?
Let me jump in and then Jesse, I'll feel free to either add or correct. But yeah, so Supervisor, you brought up a really good question, which is locomotives, and their emissions curve is pretty flat actually. It takes a long time for locomotives to be turned over. Locomotives themselves last a very long time. So there's a number of layers kind of to the question there. But what we see into the future, the short of it is that what we see into the future is that locomotive emissions are already very large, and they become relatively larger because other sources continue to decline over time through other efforts that are going on, and just a relatively slower pace that happens in that particular sector. Just to remind the board, we also submitted a petition related to locomotives for stronger national standards to really accelerate the reductions that you see in that sector. At the state level, there is an effort underway to look at some options to work with the rail companies to further reduce and accelerate those reductions. But there are some very serious and difficult challenges related to the regulation of locomotive sources under the Constitution Commerce Clause, and I think it's going to be important that there's strong engagement at CARB with EPA, but also with the rail companies to see if there is some way to continue accelerating those reductions. Now we've provided incentive funds for a number of years, and we've seen some really exciting technologies start to be developed and demonstrated in the locomotive sector. So there's definitely work underway. In fact, even in the AB 617 communities, we've seen strong interest in looking at whether it's switchers for short haul or whether it's in other contexts, some of the line haul, with the bigger Class 1 rail, companies. There's certainly efforts underway, but there is a big issue here that as we look ahead into the future, we've got to figure out some creative ways to further reduce locomotive emissions.
We're literally looking for an act of Congress to fix this. This is kind of beyond everybody's ability to fix this. And I'm just saying, as much as we do, we can keep reducing. If the rail's here, we keep reducing, that pollution's still there, and we're not affecting. We're trying to do all this stuff, but yet that's there. And the other thing is, and I would call it background pollution. Even if there was nobody living here. I mean, if you look at the first things that were ever written by the Spanish about the San Joaquin Valley, they had a tendency not to come in here for several reasons. One was the mosquitoes that were everywhere, and the other one was called a smoky, mosquito-infested hell. That's basically how they described the San Joaquin Valley. And the Native Americans that lived here were very tough people. There wasn't a lot of them, but they had to live in that situation. It wasn't very many of them, but yet it was a polluted place with no people here. So that's all I got to say.
Thank
But-
you. Thank you for your comment. And I see that Dr. Sheriffs also has a comment.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Supervisor Mendez. Jesse, thank you for your presentation. It is complicated, but I think the staff is doing a better and better job of providing some clarity to these layers that we struggle with, but also understanding better how attaining one helps attain the others, and work that we do today pays off in the future. I just have to observe from a public health standpoint, remember these standards are set based on best science, and recognizing how difficult it is to achieve attainment. It's taking us 10, 12, 15 years to reach those standards. And from a public health standpoint, I don't know how to describe it as other than sad, because clearly a significant portion of the population is being exposed at these, what we understand are unhealthy levels as we work to achieve attainment. So it always adds a sense of urgency to me in the work that we do. And it's a reminder, the exceptional events, fortunately, they don't affect attainment. They are not so predictable, but the wildfire issues, I won't say they've become predictable, but they have become expected over the last few years, and they're certainly affecting health. And I'm not advocating they become part of our what we have to cope with to get attainment. But again, it's in the back of all of our minds, the health effects of these things, and how important it is, every bit that we can do with what we can do. Your presentation reminded me, what are our tools? Well, we have regulations for things that we can regulate. There is incentive money. And we have gotten very good at managing incentive money and have been able to attract very important dollars to the Valley to help businesses and the public cope with the very challenging changes. We haven't talked much about the role of public education and the bully pulpit, if you will. But I think public education deserves more emphasis in terms of helping the public do the right thing. For the things that they have control over. And the other thing that has been mentioned and was highlighted by Supervisor Mendez's remarks, advocacy. That is an extremely important role for us. And the graphs, partly the advocacy indicating the importance of the things that the federal government has control over, that we need to be advocating. Not just for incentive money, but for regulations to control those emissions. So we need to be very active supporting federal actions. The incentive money is an easy sell, although it can be complicated in how to distribute it effectively. And also using incentive money to help push technology. Which I know something is we pay attention to, but has an ever increasing role, I think, in the work that we do. So thank you for your presentation. You added a lot of clarity.
Thank you, Dr. Sheriffs. And I see Dr. Tanya Pacheco-Warner would like to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I love the table you presented, and early in the presentation. I think I'm gonna paste that somewhere on my office, print it out and paste it. So thank you for that. One of the things I just Supervisor Mendez's comments, and we do have, and we have worked on some control measures in terms of what we can do in the rail yards, and I think that continuing to look for those opportunities is definitely essential. I know that to definitely agree with Dr. Sheriff's points about the public health impact of the wildfires. While we look to attainment, also thinking forward about public health is important. One of the things that, you know, like he also said, you know, just looking for those opportunities. And I think, you know, today's public comment presented us with a great opportunity. For example, in terms of the, you know, incentivizing the use of electric bikes. So I think that there are definitely things that we can continue to do to continue to push the envelope. And I think that, you know, striking the right balance as a district has in the past of incentivizing, but also regulatory action is important because of these unique challenges. So, you know, regardless of the topography, or even, you know, and I would say because of our mobile source challenges, I think that we need to continue to push the envelope as you all do with the grants you apply for in terms of turnover of ag equipment and the, you know, the Valley Can program. I think pushing for more funds on all of that front is always really important. And I know that it's sort of a battle every year, but I think that it's one that I do see that it will pay off. And I have seen that, you know, we are capable of doing really bold things together. And you know, the ag burn phase out is an example of that. And I think that, you know, as we think about these contingency measures, as we think about, you know, what we could or couldn't possibly do, you know, that we're able to see the success of something so difficult that we've been able to accomplish together, and use that as sort of like how ambitious we get in some of these things that we strive to do. And because I know that this district staff is incredibly hardworking and can do these really difficult things. And, you know, I surely see my role as the CARB representative to make sure that the collaboration happens, to help make that happen from the state level too. So thank you so much to all of you who work so hard on the implementation of all of these things that have reduced, you know, our pollution and getting us closer to attainment. And I think that, you know, because of where we're at in different spaces, we will have to continue to push the envelope even further, but I definitely know we can do it. We're up for the challenge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the thoughtful comments. Supervisor Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and one of my first meetings sitting next to the new chairman, so congratulations, and I'm glad it's you now. Thank you for the report, the update, and I think, you know, as been the tradition of this board, we always look beyond the boundaries of our current goals, and I got to tell you, you know, having the Region 9 EPA administrator here this morning, I wish he was still here because, you know, I think there are impacts that this board has no control over. And when you look at the signal legislation that's coming down, 1 to 2 million acres possibly going out of production, the whole west side of this valley under threat, lack of water. And I think we need to create, not create, I think we need to push our way into that discussion about water supplies. When you look at the single-minded views with respect to the Endangered Species Act and how that affects water supplies in California, when you look at the lack of awareness of the productive nature of agriculture and as a net scrubber of the environment, ozone, PM 2.5, you name it. We're transitioning, you know, thousands of acres into solar production in this valley. That land is gone forever. 30 years there will not be any further agricultural products on that land. So I think we need to push head first into this discussion about things that are viable to the management of the long term. When we achieve these goals, we're going to get to these lofty goals, and then all of these other challenges that are hitting us in the face that nobody wants to address, that are going to possibly cause us to backstep, I think are vital, specifically to this valley. So I would be a proponent of pushing harder into that lane and having our voices heard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for touching on some of the realities that we'll be facing. And I don't see any further board comment. So at this time, I'd like to call for public comment.
There is no public comment in the public member in the north and south, so we will come here to the central. Is there any public comment here in the room in central? And yes, we do have one.
Thank you very much, staff, and great job. My name is Manuel Cunha, president of Nisei Farmers League, and also part of the USDA Air Quality Task Force that is kind of idled right now. But a couple of things that was said even by Supervisor Peterson is very, very important. Part of this discussion will be that land set aside on the west side. If it's 500,000 acres, the farmers can't farm it, but we have to keep something on it, that it be protected then from the Endangered Species Act taking over. Because if some critter moves in, now someday when we do get water, we decide to build more storage in this state rather than on what the people did 60 years ago. I think that needs to be a strong discussion. Number two is on the fires, the wildfires. Maybe a contingency plan would be that the forest has to be responsible and the parks for forest management. They need to log that land correctly, and they're not. And when these fires break, houses, cars, and human beings are burned and destroyed. So I think the wildfires do have to have a plan that the government is responsible for, and including this state, that we have to manage our forests a lot better. Agriculture jumped to the table with the district and ARB, and we have a plan for no more ag burning except for disease. We came to the table and we are protecting our valley, but also the farmers are able to still farm and do that. We can still do the same with the forest, but they have to be responsible for a heck of a lot more than just saying words, but they need to have a management plan to deal with both sides of it. And again, ag is doing its part and we will continue. My greatest fear for this valley will be Sigma. When it takes place in 23 and fully implemented in 2025, that's when you're going to see, if we don't build any reservoirs or any storage facilities, we are going to have some serious problems. But the farmers should not be held hostage by the Clean Air Act or by the Endangered Species Act because of what water and we did as a state to not build structure. But I'm worried about that open land. Suddenly a critter come in, now that farmer can never go back and farm that land. So we need to make sure that we have that discussion going on with EPA and with the Parks and Forests and the government, the federal side of it, Department of Bureau Interior, as well as the state. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your comments.
And I see no more public comment here in the central. We'll move on to Zoom. And then I have Jasmine Martinez.
Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Jasmine Martinez, a Kern County resident and coordinator with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition, or CVAC. CVAC is a diverse coalition unified in our advocacy to restore clean air to the San Joaquin Valley on unceded Yokuts and Miwok lands. It is dangerous to exaggerate progress in one of the nation's most polluted places. The San Joaquin Valley suffers from the worst particle pollution in the nation, and we are the only air basin that has failed to meet the outdated 1997 federal standard for PM 2.5. My younger siblings and I have never known a day of PM 2.5 attainment, and continued failure to meet health protective standards for both PM and ozone pollution has damaged everything from my early lung development to my life expectancy. This has been a deliberate compromise of mine and my community's health for industry profits. Numerous studies have proven the health impacts from living near oil and gas operations. Within 2,000 feet, there is an increased risk for cancer at up to 5 times US EPA's threshold for acceptable risk, and a recent study showed that the closer someone lives to an active or recently idle well site, the poorer that person's lung function, even after adjusting for other risk factors. Rather than do everything possible to tackle unsafe levels of air pollution, the Valley Air District continues to play a paper and public relations game, using tactics like scapegoating exceptional events like wildfires and manipulating monitor siting instead of regulating our most polluting industries. Oil and gas, industrialized agriculture, and mismatched land uses that place toxic sources near where people live. Oil and gas facilities are among our region's largest stationary sources of direct PM 2.5, yet the Air District promotes pay-to-pollute schemes like the Broken Emission Reduction Credits Program, which has allowed oil and gas facilities to further expand operations and concentrate significantly more pollution in my community. Valley residents and CVAC advocates have urged the district to take more aggressive actions, such as removing exemptions, closing loopholes, and requiring direct reductions instead of credits, but we continue to see lenient rules and exemptions favoring the industry. The Valley Air District is a captured agency that has failed my community and caused irreversible harm to the health of generations of Valley residents. We must do everything possible to control and regulate the resources that are within our control and in the district's authority, since they can cause and exacerbate climate change impacts that we are seeing in the Valley. Today, I ask for the district to take the time to listen to those who are most impacted by the failure to attain and commit to fully considering public health and social cost analyses in all rules and plans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I have Thomas Menz.
Welcome, and please go ahead.
Yes, Thomas Menz once again. Thank you. So it's most assuredly welcome progress to note that the benchmark monitoring at Fresno Garland Street for PM2.5 shows only 11 daily exceedances of the 24-hour standard this past wood-burning curtailment season, and an average PM2.5 density of over those 4 months from November to February of 21 micrograms per cubic meter. And that's really something. But at the same time, monitoring at Edison High School in the South Central Fresno 617 community shows an average PM2.5 density to be above 28 micrograms per cubic meter over that same period, with 39 days over the 24-hour federal health standard. So this shows we have more work to do, and perhaps more than we thought. And perhaps we've been using the wrong benchmark for monitoring urban Fresno. It would be understandable if some of you wish you'd never heard of AB 617, because the monitoring there shows how much more progress we need to make, how many more emission reductions we need if the Valley is to come into compliance with the 24-hour standard and the annual standard. But I'm certain most of you want to understand exactly what's causing those dramatically higher numbers for residents of Southwest Fresno, what the source of those emissions might be, and what can be done to meet the needs of that long overlooked community, because clearly something more needs to be done if the Valley is going to reach attainment, the 24-hour standard particularly. So just to highlight the stark differences that I'm talking about here, residents of urban Fresno Clovis experience, by way of comparison, the monitor in Clovis over these same prior 4 months averaged 18.8 micrograms per cubic meter, while Edison was averaging 28.3 micrograms per cubic meter. That's a 10 microgram difference, and that's a world apart. Maybe it's not such a surprise to some of us. Years prior, purple air monitoring at Edison has shown much higher levels of PM2.5 than other parts of the urban area during the curtailment season. And I've not unpredictably harbored suspicion that residential wood burning is at least a component of those higher levels, which are occurring with that telltale pattern of PM2.5 spiking in the evening hours. And I hope any speciation studies include tracers for wood burning and the presence of levoglucosan in the samples. Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Next, I have Cynthia Pinto-Cabrera.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Chair and members of the board. I'm Cynthia Pinto-Cabrera, Policy Assistant with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition, Madera County resident and asthmatic. And I'd just like to quickly begin by letting you all know I've never known a day of clean air in the Valley, and I am 25 years old. The San Joaquin Valley is the most polluted air basin in the nation for fine particles, one of the most polluted for ozone. For decades, valley cities and counties have been ranked among the most polluted in the nation in the yearly American Lung Association State of the Air Report, impacting the health and the quality of life for all valley residents. Particle pollution and ozone pollution make everyone sick. Roughly half of the San Joaquin Valley population falls under what we call sensitive receptors that are impacted by pollution. And this includes pregnant people, people who work outdoors, people who have pre-existing health conditions, children and youth who are under 18, whose systems are still developing and can permanently be damaged due to air pollution, and those over 65. Over 550,000 residents have asthma, about 100,000 of them being children. Children in the valley are twice as likely to develop asthma by 18 compared to the national average. 1 in 4 children in the valley have asthma, and this is the highest rate in the state, according to the Children's Health Interview Survey. Overburdened communities continuously endure higher exposure rates. We are all paying the price for air pollution, which costs the valley more than $1,600 per person each year. That's nearly $6 billion annually. These dollars represent lives lost prematurely, asthma attacks, missed school days, and missed work days. Under the current rulemaking process, the Valley Air District is only accounting for the costs to industry in their rules and plans. Public health and social costs must also be assessed and factored in the Air District rulemaking plans. We urge the Valley Air District to include these health costs and social costs in all of their rulemaking processes and plans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I have Pedro Hernandez.
Hi, please go ahead.
Hello, yeah, good morning, board. My name is Pedro Hernandez. I'm the Deputy Director with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition. As I'm sure many of you are familiar with, CVAC is an organization with nearly 2 decades of experience centering environmental justice and public health in efforts to pertain to clean air in the San Joaquin Valley. And so my comments today are going to center on the outstanding need to account for the impact of climate stressors and social costs in our efforts to attain these clean air goals. And in the last several months, there's been several authoritative reports from the IPCC and state of California agencies demonstrating that the San Joaquin Valley is experiencing some of the harshest and most acute vulnerabilities to air pollution. And moreover, these climate change trends are rapidly shifting the baseline conditions that will continue to exacerbate air quality in the region for all residents. And without accounting for these changing baseline conditions, the Air District will never meet its goals, and residents in every county within your jurisdiction will be left behind. For example, Camden Mobile Home Park, which is the place where I grew up in and is in Supervisor Mendez's district, continues to be ravaged by air quality pollution from the adjacent highways, adjacent dairies, and agricultural lands. And more than half of the population in the San Joaquin Valley lives in disadvantaged communities, and they should not be having to bear the burden of problems that could have been solved years ago. The region is also unique in its concentration of vulnerable communities and the high rate of climate stressors, such as drought and wildfire smoke. And so this intersection, right, will continue to exacerbate vulnerable communities that have been affected for years. And for example, ozone and PM 2.5 are now becoming year-round issues, leaving many residents in every corner of the valley without respite of changing seasons or even the rain that would potentially clean the air. And so these communities also, right, that are in every representative's jurisdiction lack the resources to secure adequate health care or even retrofit their homes for improved air quality. And so sensitive populations such as children, those with pre-existing health conditions, or outdoor workers continue to bear the most disproportionate impacts in spite of all the incremental progress that has been made over the years. And so in conclusion, I'd like to make the very specific and hard ask that the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District begin to incorporate social and public health costs of degraded air quality in the development, reassessment, and final adoption of all rules and regulations pertaining to attainment of our air quality standards. As constituents within the jurisdiction of the Air Pollution Control District, we'd also like to request a formal response to this urgent matter and not be ignored as far as our other comments requesting for formal response. So thank you for your time. And again, I would like to request a formal response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Next, we have Connie Young.
Please go ahead.
Yes, hi, this is Connie Young again, and I happen to be among your category called sensitive individuals because of my age. And so there are still too many days that I have to be careful about going outside and doing physical activity. So I think that still calls for improvement. I want to thank you for this very informational presentation. I'm glad to hear a number of speakers, including the presenter, calling for more federal action. So once again, I would like to point out that a steadily rising federal price on fossil fuels will send a price signal across the economy. The funds generated could be given to households to enable them to cope with the rising prices, and or some of that money could be used to build out infrastructure for renewables and clean energy, and or for incentive programs. A price on carbon would have an effect on all sectors or across all sectors, so including transportation and industry. Passing a price on carbon will address climate change, which is contributing to our wildfires, and it will directly reduce the fossil fuel emissions that are polluting our air. So once again, I urge you to lobby our lawmakers in Washington to include carbon pricing in the budget reconciliation bills they're considering. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see no further comments.
Okay, thank you. And no further comments from the board. So thank you for the presentation once again. And next item, please.
And through the chair, I'd like to announce that Mr. Rickman has joined the meeting. Item number 9, accept $168.4 million in state farmer program funds for use in the district's agriculture equipment replacement program.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Todd DeYoung, your grants program director. And as was stated, I'm here seeking your board's approval this morning to accept $168 million in state farmer program funds for the use in the district's ag equipment replacement program. So just by way of a very brief background, reducing emissions from the ag sources is a key district strategy to meet federal air quality standards, as an important element in CARB's state SIP strategy for the San Joaquin Valley. Building on past air quality efforts, the district, in partnership with CARB, adopted the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, which you just heard about from Jesse, that outlines the actions that are necessary for further improving the valley's air quality and meeting these federal health-based air quality standards for PM 2.5. As part of recent attainment planning efforts for the federal PM 2.5 standards, the state committed to reduce 11 tons per day of NOx and 0.58 tons per day of PM 2.5 from agricultural equipment by 2024 in the valley. These commitments were included in the San Joaquin Valley Supplement to the 2016 State Strategy for the State Implementation Plan. Adopted by CARB in 2018, were subsequently included in the Valley Air District's 2018 PM 2.5 plan. To support these commitments in 2017, AB 134 and AB 109 authorized funding to reduce criteria, air toxic, and greenhouse gas emissions from the ag industry, including funding for clean agricultural harvesting equipment, heavy-duty trucks, ag irrigation pump engines, tractors, and other equipment used in ag operations. Subsequently, the district worked closely, worked closely with CARB to develop the Farmer Program guidelines. The Farmer Program builds upon more than 25 years of collaboration and innovation between the Valley Ag community, the district, and CARB in addressing emissions from ag sources, particularly within the Valley. During that time, Valley Ag, in partnership with the district and USDA NRCS, has invested more than $1.5 billion in public and private funding towards replacing older, high-polluting equipment and implementing other measures to reduce emissions associated with Valley Ag operations. To date, the district has been allocated over $261 million in Farmer Program funding during the first 3 funding cycles. For year 4, which is fiscal year 21-22, the state legislature allocated $212,582,000 to CARB to fund grants with air districts under the 4th funding cycle of the Farmer Program. This includes $210,882,000 that was made available to air districts statewide after CARB withheld $1.7 million for program administration. Of this amount, the district was allocated $168,425,600, which represents 80% of the total statewide funding for this important program. The table on this slide shows during the first 3 years of the program where the funding has gone. The number of units we funded over 6,000 units in total, with 3,400 of those being agricultural tractors. You can see the table shows the incentive amounts that were available, the applicant cost share, which is significant, and I'll get to that in a little bit more detail in later slides, and the total project cost. As you can see, for instance, for agricultural tractors, the incentive amounts that we've provided over the first 3 years of this program, it's about a 38% incentive, which is important, again, as we talk about some of the potential enhancements to the program in later slides. So the success of the district's program is predicated on providing these adequate incentives to the farmers to voluntarily replace their old equipment. The State Farmer Program guidelines allow for incentives of up to 80% of the new equipment cost. However, the district's experience has shown that incentive levels between 50 and 60% of the equipment cost provides an adequate incentive and allows the district to fund as much new equipment as possible with available funding in a very cost-effective manner. On average, the tractor replacement program has maintained a cost effectiveness of approximately $9,000 per ton, which is significantly below the state's program cost effectiveness cap of $33,000 per ton. Unfortunately, with high demand for farm equipment and global supply chain issues, we've seen equipment costs that have continued to rise over the last several years. This has resulted in a lower overall percentage of equipment costs that have been covered by the incentives that are made available. While the district target is 50 to 60% of the eligible equipment costs, the current incentive levels are resulting in 30 to 40% of the equipment costs. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we were at 38% of the equipment costs in the ag tractor section. Several of the categories are actually well below 30% of the incentives with our current levels. This has resulted in new applications being down over the past 6 months. We've seen a significant decline in new applications to the program by more than 50% over the last 6 months. So we're proposing revisions that are designed to bring the incentive levels back up to the board-approved 50 to 60% funding target across all of the categories. And again, this is allowed and supported by CARB under the state guidelines that authorize funding up to that 80% mark. We've been working closely with CARB and the USDA, NRCS, and agricultural stakeholders on these new incentive amounts, and they're based on extensive research conducted across a wide variety of equipment manufacturers, models, options, and equipment configurations. So here's the table that shows the current incentive levels based on the several categories that we have in our program, and then the proposed incentive levels, which you can see here. All of the categories are subject to a maximum 60% cap of the eligible costs, and the proposed incentives are designed to meet that 50 to 60% incentive level in most cases in most projects. And while these increased incentives in these categories may have a slight impact to overall cost effectiveness, the district's program will continue to generate these surplus emission reductions well below the established cost effectiveness limits. And with these changes, we expect to see a significant increase in the number of applications. An increase in applications is critical to maintain the high level of participation in the program that's needed to meet the state's emission reduction targets for agricultural equipment. So your board has consistently prioritized equitable access to district incentive funding for all Valley residences, businesses, and stakeholders, with a particular focus on traditionally underserved communities, individuals, and small businesses. Examples of this commitment include dedicated program funding, higher incentive amounts, and increased multilingual targeted outreach and education. For example, in the Alternatives to Agricultural Open Burning program, your board has provided dedicated funding and increased incentive amounts for smaller agricultural operations. In addition to the proposed enhanced incentive levels, the district, working closely with CARB, has developed a proposed pilot program concept to allow for late model used equipment to be purchased in the farmer program. Recognizing the economic challenges that many small growers face in purchasing new equipment, even with incentives, CARB is proposing to add an option for small growers to replace their Tier 0 and Tier 1 equipment with Tier 3 or newer used equipment. Under this pilot program, that will only initially be available to small Valley growers and will include safeguards such as inspections by certified OEM dealers to ensure that the used equipment purchased will have a long useful life and realize significant emission reductions. These changes to the farmer program guidelines are currently going through the public process, and we expect full approval in the coming weeks. And upon approval, the district will incorporate these changes into the program. I need to go back. My apologies. I skipped one important bullet here. So within this program, the district is proposing to increase the eligible incentive amounts for up to 80% of eligible costs for equipment replacement for small ag operations. This is consistent with what we've done in other programs, and it will be available to those farmers under 100 acres in size. It's the maximum allowable incentive under the farmer program guidelines. And we'll ascertain the farm size during the application process, similar to what we do in the Alternatives to Open Burn program. And then we will continue to work with the agricultural stakeholders to ensure that we have continued strong outreach and access to this program. My apologies for skipping that. So the farmer program and other program funding is key to continually advancing the cleanest and lowest emitting technology available to the agricultural sector. These programs prioritize funding to the cleanest available certified technology and emerging zero emission technology and continually drive innovation within the agricultural sector. Towards that end, the district has been working with CARB to streamline the approval process for emerging zero emission ag equipment within the farmer program guidelines. These measures will likewise be included in the upcoming changes to the farmer program guidelines that are currently moving through their public process. And they will likewise be incorporated into the district program upon approval by CARB. Now, the farmer program includes these keys to this continuing to advance the lowest emitting technology in the ag sector. The program funds the cleanest available technology, and then working with CARB to include a more streamlined process for zero emission tractors within the program guidelines. Essentially now, to fund a zero emission tractor, it has to go through what's called a case-by-case approval process. The improvements to the program that are being worked on by CARB in the district will incorporate funding for zero emission ag equipment. It'll streamline that process. They'll no longer have to go through that case-by-case process. So upon board approval of these proposed enhancements today in the district's ag equipment replacement and CARB approval of the farmer program enhancements, we'll immediately incorporate these changes into the district program. We'll work closely with the ag industry and stakeholders to conduct outreach and disseminate this information. And then we'll work with the agricultural commodity groups, community-based organizations, and equipment dealers to, excuse me, to conduct targeted multilingual outreach to ensure small growers are knowledgeable about the newly available incentive program options. And so these are the recommendations before you today. I'm not going to read them all. They're in your packet. And before I bring it back to the board for comments and questions, I believe we do have a representative, Erin Uchida from CARB, who would like to say a few words. Erin and her group at CARB have been instrumental in working with the Air District through the years to make the farmer program a success. So I'd like to open it up to Erin, please.
Go ahead, Erin. You should be able to talk.
Hi, good morning, Chair and board members. My name is Erin Uchida, and I'm a staff air pollution specialist at the California Air Resources Board. I've worked with the district for the last 6 years on agricultural incentives, and I wanted to comment today in support of the district's continued participation in administering the farmer program, as well as the proposed program changes. The district has been an important partner for us at CARB in developing and implementing our incentive programs. I first began working with the district on the agricultural trade-up pilot project, which was a new and multi-step incentive model intended to serve small growers for which new equipment purchases were infeasible, and then on the farmer program since its inception in 2018. District staff have provided meaningful feedback and valuable insight in the development and implementation of our agricultural incentive programs, using their knowledge and expertise from administering incentives for more than 20 years. And as Todd mentioned in his presentation, recently we have worked closely with the district to develop 2 new project categories for the farmer program this year: a zero emission agricultural equipment category and a used equipment category for small producers in the San Joaquin Valley, which builds on the district's experience in implementing trade-up projects and provides additional funding opportunities for small farmers. The district and the Valley agricultural industry have been a key part of the success of the farmer program. District staff have done an amazing job implementing well over $200 million in farmer funding in less than 4 years. These projects provide substantial criteria pollutant emission reductions while simultaneously reducing greenhouse gases, and more than 50% of the program's funding has been invested in disadvantaged and low-income communities. Thank you for giving me a chance to comment today. We look forward to continue building on the success of the farmer program in partnership with the district.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, and thank you for the presentation. I see that some board members would like to speak, so we'll start with Councilmember Bessinger.
Thank you, Chair. I really like the portion of this program that permits small ag operators to get used equipment. And here's my question. Let's say I'm a larger than 100 acre operation. My neighbor is a 90 acre operation. Can I sell one of my tier 3 tractors to him, purchase a new one to replace that, and then they also get a percentage for the purchase, or do we have to get rid of 2 vehicles?
That's a great question, and I think the answer in general is yes. But what we want to do is we want to ensure that the transaction happens through an OEM dealer at this point, at least for the pilot phase. We want to make sure, and there's a couple reasons for that. We want to make sure that the equipment goes through a very robust inspection process to make sure that, you know, that used equipment that's being traded is, you know, has significant remaining useful life. It doesn't have major structural or, you know, engine component issues that then would get passed on to that new recipient. So we want to make sure that to the extent that we can do that through the OEM, and then, you know, make that sale, and then, you know, with the funding that maybe that person gets from selling their tractor, then they could go, purchase a newer tractor or a brand new tractor. But at least initially, we want to make sure that the transaction occurs through an OEM dealer to ensure that there are those safeguards that are in place.
So it's kind of like transferring ownership of a gun. I can't give it to you directly. I have to go through a licensed dealer. What I see this, especially with the small growers, this is going to help our disadvantaged communities with people who have a farming operation that's been in the family for years, but maybe they're suffering a little bit because of the drought. Now, if I have a 100-acre or less operation, and I'm forced by regulation to I have a 200-acre operation, but I'm forced by regulations to leave 100 acres fallow. Does that make me a small operation, or do we not have
another great question. I think we'd have to look at that on a case-by-case basis to determine, how long that intended fallow, if that's going to be fallow for a significant period of time, or if it's just a temporary, that brings you under that 100 acres total. The program was really designed to get the smallest farmers, those who have 100 total acres in the valley. That's kind of the way we've defined it, that 100 acre threshold. So if you have 200 acres, 100 is fallow. That's something we could certainly look at, but I think just in general, we would want to limit it to those that have that 100 total acres.
Okay.
But certainly something we'd be open to looking at.
I can see the short-term problem, if it's fallow because of the drought, and God help us, we get some rain, then but they still have access to the program, but as the larger ag developer. Thank you very much.
Okay, great questions. Supervisor Pereira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I look through this program, something occurred to me, and that in today's world, a 100-acre farm is a small farm, but so is a 300 or 400-acre farm. And so I was thinking, so how do we address that issue? And so what I'm thinking is maybe having a third column. Right, we have 100 acres or less at 80%, and we have, and then the rest at 60%. Could we create a category of 101 to 501 acres, and maybe do something in between, like 70%? I think that in today's economy, someone that's farming 300 acres probably makes less money than somebody that was farming 100 acres 15 years ago, and so. Anyways, just kind of wanted to put that out there and see what you have for input and what my colleagues might think. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just board members, I know there's further comments here on the screen, but I just wanted to provide a little bit of a response with respect to flexibility in the program and whether that's something that could be accommodated. And I think Supervisor Pereira brings up a really good question. It is hard to draw these lines, and certainly in the couple of 100-acre range, you see a lot of similar issues in terms of the feasibility of being able to transition equipment to the latest equipment, very high cost, a lot of other issues, as you've heard from multiple board members, related to water and other issues that are impacting agricultural growers. So there's absolutely flexibility in the program guidelines to be able to construct this third tier. That would be, as Supervisor Pereira had mentioned, there's some room there between the 60% and the 80%. The guidelines would allow that, and if the board was interested and supportive of that change, it's something that could be accommodated with the item in front of you today. So I just wanted to let you know that the guidelines would allow for that, and there's some parallels as well to some of the other recent incentive program discussions related to the ag burn alternatives, where for less than 500 acres there were some special accommodation as well to try to increase access to the program and that program as well. So I think there are some parallels as well. So that would be something that we could accommodate if there was support by the board.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you. Following up on that small ag discussion, it's a complicated discussion. And I'm a little reluctant I think there are a lot of nuances to it, and I'm not sure we can work through them in our discussion today on this, but it's something that we need to continue to look at. But I guess the one observation I would make would be, well, it makes sense that we are consistent across our programs in terms of how we're defining smaller operations, because I think we're driven by the same principles, regardless of which program we're talking about, whether it's ag burning or the farmer program. I'm pleased that we are worrying about this. Clearly, many issues for the small farmers, and we need to be cognizant and considering, and the environmental justice issues that are deeply tied up in that as well. It also reminds me the small farmers are not going to be interested in all the categories of equipment. And although we've looked for some equivalency in terms of the level of support, incentive funding, not all categories are the same. I think some probably, I don't know the inventory. I hope the staff has some idea. I would suspect some of the categories tend to be older equipment, and some tend to be newer equipment. Some would be categories that would be very relevant to small farming operations, and others would be very unlikely that small farmers would have such equipment. But again, it's important that we are making a good consideration of this area. The other important question, I think, is in terms of how this program promotes opportunities in terms of what is a developing technology and market in terms of electric tractors. Historically, we've done a lot with promoting the UTVs as all electric. There are a lot more options in terms of tractors than there were 2 years ago, 5 years ago. Certainly, they're not tractors for every category of need, but I'm aware of at least 4 manufacturers for 25 horse to 70 horse tractors. And I think Fendt has a E100, 100 horsepower equivalent tractor now. So there are opportunities out there, and I would want to be sure that our funding is helping support people who are thinking of those kinds of choices, and in some ways even more important, that it is helping push the technology, because when somebody goes from tier 0 or 1 to tier 3, that is a big victory. But boy, if somebody goes from tier 0 or 1 to a 0 emission vehicle, that is an astonishing accomplishment, and that's something that will be paying dividends for forever. So I'd like to understand a little better how we're promoting, and I hope we can do more than simplifying the process from a case by case to a more generalized kind of way to drive the technology and support people who are considering these vehicles. It's certainly very important because, has been mentioned, transportation, critical in terms of NOx and PM 2.5. Well, I believe agriculture accounts for about 20% of our NOx and PM 2.5. That's the ballpark. So this is very important work, very important incentive money. Thank you, staff, for the hard work, for setting the good track record to make us such an attractive place to be distributing this money.
Thank you. Supervisor Rickman.
Thank you, Chair. Just real quick, I just want to show my support for Supervisor Pereira's recommendation.
Okay, noted. Supervisor Mendez.
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit more about that. That was a great idea. I'd heard about it, and Supervisor Pereira's idea. Really, in today's world, I mean, 500 acres actually is a small operation. And I liked Supervisor Pereira about another, deal in between, for that. I think it's pretty important because really, there's not a lot of really small farms. There is on the east side, but even you get on the west side, if you have a section or two sections of ground, you're a small farmer compared to everybody else. That's just the facts. And the fact that you've got the pilot element in this is a great deal because that's how you refine these programs. And that's one of the reasons why our staff has been so successful compared to the rest of the state is they run these pilot programs and they get the bugs out of it and then they put it in the regular program. So, I mean, they've basically worked the kinks out of it, Todd, you've done a great job and your staff has with this, but it's really important that a tier 3 tractor that's already been used can go back to the dealer, and if staff can work with them and make sure it's still at tier 3 standard, and then it goes back out. That's a pretty important deal. It's almost like taking the gun, Councilman Bessinger, and make sure it's in working order before we give it to the other party. Thank you.
Okay, and I see Supervisor Pereira would like to make another comment.
Well, actually, I'd like to make a motion. You accept that at this time?
Sure.
Or do you want public comment first?
Sure.
Go ahead. You can do public comment. I'll make the motion later.
Okay. Well, I was just going to comment to thank everyone for highlighting some of the complexities to this issue because it really shows the effort for a transparent real-time response to real circumstances, and it really helps build trust within industry to further support the district's mission as a public health agency with long-term investments and improved air quality. So with that, we can move to public comment.
And there are still no public members in the north and south, so we'll go ahead and go on here to the central, and we do have public comment here.
First, I want to thank ARB, Richard Corey, Michelle, Lucina, Aaron, Evan Powell, and Michael Benjamin, and Edie, and all those folks at ARB worked with the district very close with Todd and Aaron and his entire team. We've been at this since 2008. There is one thing we must not forget. We have 2023 of December 31st, we have to have 11 tons of NOx, which is approximately around 12,000 tractors. If we don't get it by that date and time, there is this thing over here called a regulation proposed. Now, we did great for 2008, for 2015, SIP and all that, we went way over. So we do have 1 year and 9 months left to get to the remaining tonnage, which is probably about 2.5 tons left.
I don't know if it's that much, but
Close, which is about 3,000 tractors. So, and I'm taking a little time here because the history of this thing needs to be known is that the staff and the district and the ag industry and the dealers have worked very closely on this new concept. Following the smoke program, 3 different options, 100, 100 to 500, and then over. Same type of concept for these small farmers. You have a small farmer here today testifying, a couple of dealers and chippers. Is that the manufacturers in 2020 of this country ran into a serious problem of computer parts and everything, and building tractors kicked us way back. EPA does not concern itself about that, and ARB doesn't. We need to have that 11 tons by the end of December. So every 0 and 1 and even tier 2 we get in, and we put that farmer into a 3. Electric tractors are out there. We have not seen any of them in operation. Until we actually see them in operation, we the farmers, we the industries, that's why that option was there that Aaron spoke about. It allows funding to help those farmers that want to try and go into electric. It's there to help them. That's why that's there now. The trade-up program has been there in the past, trade and use program. The dealer must get that used tractor, that tier 3 from a farmer. The dealer is going to go through, or she is going to go through with a checklist. They developed a checklist to check the transmission, engine, rear end, all of that. So that process is going on to protect that tier 3 tractor that's going to go to that small farmer. That 200-acre farmer may need a used tractor program. Maybe that's fine, 4,000 hours, 6,000 hours, but there's a limit. I'm going to go over my time, I know that. I apologize. The program is tremendous. The funding that the district has proposed to raise is absolutely essential to get these farmers back in. If you're not a farmer, if you are a farmer, you will understand the water crisis and you will understand what's before them. But I want to acknowledge, Mr. Chairman, and to this board, and even to ARB, the farmers have put in their fair share, even with the tough conditions of marketing, the containers, the almond price, the peach price, the freezing, all of these things impact our farmers, and yet they're stepping to the table. And this morning I did not hear, I just heard that the valley is dirtier and dirtier. Our farmers have done a tremendous job of replacing their farm equipment. And I want to thank the board, all of the past chairs, but the district. The funding is important, and I want to thank the staff tremendously. Todd and Aaron have done a great job, Mr. Chairman. And there's some people here today who will speak, including the Black Farmer Organization that works with small farmers. Thank you for the extra time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we have more public comment here in the central.
Good morning and welcome.
Okay, good morning. Board, thank you for this opportunity to have an input into this. My name is Will Scott Jr. I'm a small farmer. I'm also the current president of African American Farmers of California. The tractor program to me was a godsend, really, because first of all is that when I talked to Manuel, I saw equity in what you was doing because you extended down to the small farmers. As you know, as a small farmer, we don't have the capital in order for us to participate fully in this thing. But what you did was 3 things that you did for the small farmers. That one is that you allowed him to play a part into this clean air fight. Also, 2, you made him able to be more efficient and also be productive. The group I work with, the African American farmers who are underserved, is that they're reluctant to get involved in these programs because of the history of what has happened to them when they tried to be served, they wasn't served. But I've convinced a lot of them they're participating in these programs now. And I think you'll be getting some applications because they're ready. Also, we're trying to get more African American farmers into farming, because that is our legacy. If you look at the history in California here, is that you're talking about over 100,000 farmers, and we make up maybe less than 500, which is a dismal, less than 0.5%. But we have a part to play in this. And this tractor program, to me, is really, it's amazed me too, because the equity was there, you extended it down. I received a tractor, and I got in the program too, but I had mixed emotion too, because I received a tractor that had more horsepower, and that's what I need. I need something over horsepower. But when they took my tractor in there, they took it to the place, and I saw them crush my tractor. That hurt me. Because, if you used to have an old equipment, it may not be functioning efficiently, but, you have a relationship with it. At least you go out there and cross your finger, it'll start up, But this program, too, was a godsend to it. And I have a lot of young farmers that want to come into it. But you know, to be a farmer is cost prohibitive. Am I, I'm just saying. But anyway, I like to say this is that what you're doing, and I think you're true, but also too is I think coming out into the field and actually find out what the small farmers need and how do we participate in this program would be of an advantage to us because we like to be in this business. And I contend this is that we should make sure that we have the small farmers. I think you heard the word too is that they say disadvantage. I'll go on record. I don't like that term. We're underserved, you know, and I think that once we're allowed to participate equitably, we can do what we're supposed to do. And I think we're needed because the next crisis will be food. Also, too, you got 2023. I'm over. In 2023, you're gonna do this no burn. We should have some places, something in place for the small farmers so that he can do what he has to do to get rid of his waste. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments.
And we still have more public comment here.
Good morning.
Central.
Hey, good morning. Jimmy Perry with Fresno Equipment. So we've been involved with the Air Board since 2008. I've been pretty active with doing it with the farmers. Like Buddy said earlier, with the price decrease in the crops, you know, it's making it harder for people to buy the new equipment. And I do agree with Supervisor Pereira. I think we need to have a couple different segments because the smaller farmer is probably less than 500 acres. So I think if we can come up with a 3-tier structure, I think that'll help and that'll get guys to move and start buying the equipment because we only have a short time to do it. And if you give them more money, we'll be able to attain the goals. So that's all I need to say.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Joseph Ayerza. I'm with a local dealer, John Deere dealer, Fresno Equipment, and a small farmer, family farm. And I think these programs are great as far as the traditional tractor replacement program with the cost that has gone up recently in the last, since Tier 4 final has came out, the tractors have increased tremendously. And then also supply chain issues that we currently have going on, prices continue to go up. So the farmer is less likely to participate in the program currently due to the incentives being as low as they are and the price of tractors increased. 10 years ago, it was a good fit. Today, it's not. So appreciate you guys thinking about increasing the incentives if it makes a big difference in the future. So, all right. Well, thank you. And thank you, Aaron and Todd, for everything you guys do too.
Thanks for your comments.
My name is John Yurgat. Company is JFS Enterprises. I'm a small farmer and I'm also in the land clearing and development business. I never thought I'd be here until I started hanging out with Manuel about a year ago. So here I am. It's great what you guys have done. 3-4 years ago, I'd see my neighbors, they'd be rolling around in new John Deere tractors. I'm like, man, how'd they get these things? Like, what's going on here? And they said, oh, they traded in some equipment. That's too good to be true. You know, I don't believe it. You know, so I turned in my first piece of equipment. I think 3 years ago. I had an old John Deere that we're always working on and had mechanics messing with it, and so I got a brand new one from these guys right here, and it's great. I mean, you don't even see smoke come out of it. So I did that, and then I participated in the fleet expansion program for grinding equipment, which is awesome. You know, a lot of guys could never have afforded that equipment without the participation from you guys, and it was awesome. You made the process easy. I've done other government programs before, and it's a tax returns, all kinds of things. It's a very simple process. Air Board's great to work with, and they've streamlined everything, and it's very easy. Anyone that can read or write and get on a computer can fill out the paperwork. So thank you guys for everything, and we're continuing to do our part and be stewards of the ground. So thank you.
Thank you.
I see no other public comment here in Central. We'll go over to Zoom. I have Chris McLaughlin.
Good morning. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the board. It's pretty easy to follow all the public comments that came out of the office because I'm basically going to be reiterating a lot of what they said. But we wanted to show our support for accepting this funding for this farmer program. This funding is vital to helping the agricultural industry achieve the emission reduction goals, as well as maintain the diverse landscape of growers we currently see today. I think that was made pretty clear by Mr. Scott's comments, as well as some of the other small growers that made their points earlier. As stated in the presentation, costs of everything from shipping to products used during the growing season, as well as the equipment, have increased tremendously over the past 2 months. And I think it's something to applaud the district on, based on the adaptations that have been made to this program, highlighting funding for new technologies, different funding sources and categories, as well as highlighting small growers to be able to participate in programs like this and take advantage of the money that's available. That's duplicative to help achieve emission reduction goals, as well as help keep these growers in business and functioning as part of our agricultural industry as a whole. And so we just wanted to show our support. I apologize, I don't think I formally introduced myself. Chris McLaughlin, California Cotton Ginners and Growers Association, as well as the Western Agricultural Processors Association. We've had a number of growers participate in these programs. They've seen the benefit. They've talked about how easy the process was, how much they enjoy their new equipment. And like Mr. Scott said, it was a little sad to see their equipment get crushed, but at the same time, they saw the value of getting that new piece of equipment and doing their part in achieving these emission reductions. So just wanted to show our support and thank you for the time.
Thank you for the comment.
Next is Kevin Abernathy.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll tell you what, this in my mind is a very historic day. There's a lot of kudos that need to go around the block, starting with the vision of the board and your legislative platform that allowed staff and a lot of your commenters that you've heard work at the legislative level to go after this significant amount of funding. Can't say thanks enough to Aaron and Michelle and Evan over at CARB. The thing that I wanted to bring up was the comments and the questions that were being asked by the board as one of a lot of the commenters, again, that you've heard today. We've been asking these questions through the public outreach and workshops. Everything that you brought up, we've been having discussions with the CARB staff and the San Joaquin Valley staff to make sure that we've got flexibility. And Supervisor Pereira, to your point, I was using a term a little bit different, and I called it hobby farms. It's the guys that have an 8-to-5 job that are farming 20 acres over here, whether it's grazing or some sort of hay crop or row crop. And more importantly, the urban farmers that we all see, the strawberry stands on Monte Vista and Turlock. Those people all need access to this kind of funding. So not that we've been able to hit everything through our very, very lengthy discussions over many, many months on this process, but more importantly, we believe that the flexibility and the ability for Todd and Aaron to look at things on a case-by-case basis when new things evolve that we didn't see coming, will have the flexibility to make those changes. Even to the point, Dr. Sheriffs, we've even had discussions of the electrical upgrading that we're going to need to have as we look at electrification of farm equipment. And quite frankly, until we get some of them on farm operating in those duty cycles, we're not going to know the efficacy of in those types of applications, how they're going to perform. But MPC, Dairy Care strongly support getting this money in the district's hands and letting you guys do what you've done an outstanding job with. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see no more public comment on Zoom.
Okay, thank the public for the comments. And I see that Dr. Sheriffs has his hand raised. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And thanks to all the public for their comments, very helpful. You know, I had not gotten an answer from staff about the question that has come up about electric tractors, and understanding this board's history and interest in helping drive technology to help us get closer to our air quality goals. It is there are lots of questions to deal with as we look at electrifying tractors and infrastructure issues. I want to be sure we support people, though, and begin to get information on how it's working and where the applications can work with the technology we have and the kinds of issues we'll have in the future. You know, my understanding is ballpark electric tractors are probably order of magnitude at least a 20% premium over an equivalent horsepower tractor. And if it's not already possible in terms of the flexibility, you know, I would propose an amendment that, and Todd, you probably have a better idea of a percentage from your experience, but that there be an additional support in terms of incentive money if people want to go with an all-electric vehicle. Clearly, this is going to help us in the long term meeting our very difficult challenges. So ask if there are other board members who would support that. But first, Todd, do you have anything to lighten us?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, board member, let me give it a crack, and Todd, you know, feel free to add as well. Yeah, so Dr. Chair, you bring up a really good point, and wanted to expand on what we've already discussed, which was our goal to really further, you know, these technologies as Todd had presented on, and clearly already a priority in what we do, and it's consistent with board direction too, where the board has consistently advocated for the latest, you know, feasible technologies and doing advanced technology demonstration, which is what we're doing and trying to do and are proposing to do. But my suggestion would be, you know, we actually are actively discussing with manufacturers of these technologies, and what I hope to see in the short term would be an ability to, especially with the recommendations that we're making today, where the funding would be more clearly articulated and streamlined. What I'm hoping to see is actually some actual projects on the ground in the valley, you know, with prices, willing farmers, you know, get some demonstration going. And I think the more we learn about the cost is significantly more than 20%, by the way, from what we understand, like the ones that I've seen so far that our staff, you know, we've met with manufacturers who've been providing some early information now on, you know, where the pricing on some of this would be, but not just on the tractor cost side. Obviously, there's infrastructure considerations as well that you have to think about in addition to the incremental cost of the tractor. We feel strongly that our recommendations as proposed, you know, open the door to these demonstration projects happening. And I think the more we learn, you know, there's a program that obviously we bring back to your board on a very frequent basis, as we are today with proposed enhancements. I think once we have a better handle on, you know, where some of these costs are, where the opportunities lie, and I think there are going to be significant opportunities, to Dr. Sheriff's point. And I think there is, you know, some interest that is developing. You know, I think we can at some point, you know, have some more well-informed, you know, recommendations to the board about, you know, what accommodations we might be able to provide. For example, coupling incentives with maybe even infrastructure funding. You know, I think that we need to look at this even more broadly than just the you know, the tractor side. You know, whatever we could do to really understand how to promote that technology as we see it emerging and as we see some demonstrations going on. I'd like to propose, you know, that consistent actually with what we already intended on doing, but that we come back to the board, you know, when we have better information and better recommendations related to how those technologies may be available. We've also understood, by the way, that there are other alternative fuel technologies as well beyond electric that may also provide a good alternative to diesel. That, you know, is something that we're trying to understand. There's actually an active conversation around what those might mean as well. And you get, and by the way, Tier 4 final gives you about a 95% benefit over conventional diesel. Just wanted to make sure people understand just how significant the reductions in emissions are with these types of projects. So it is something that's already, embedded in it based on prior board direction, the continued. So that's sort of where I'm at with it in terms of that's my suggestion would be to keep an eye on this and to engage with the manufacturers, with the farmers, and as we learn more about these things, if we can do some things and have a package of things that we could do, when we know more and when we see that there's real interest in this, I think we can make those recommendations.
Supervisor Peterson.
I'm sorry, I just need to.
Oh, sorry.
That's wonderful clarification. It's great as usual. The staff are ahead of us thinking about these things. Can you make some sort of, we talking 6 months to follow up on this, Samir?
Yeah, I'll leave it to the board at this point to discuss sort of how they want to approach that. I don't want to make a hard commitment until we have, I think my suggestion would be to come back when the time is right, and I'll just leave it open at that point and see if the maker of the motion or other board members have any further direction on that issue.
Okay, Supervisor Peterson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, just to respond to Dr. Sheriff too. I think we view ourselves here as pushing technology, but I can promise you that if the technology was out there, it'd be in the field working today, long before this board heard about it, because that's who farmers are. They're looking for that cost-effective way to produce food and fiber, and without question, I would say that the bigger question is going to be, how are we going to deal with this equipment that comes loaded now? I mean, it's going to come loaded with artificial intelligence, and some of that is going to provide incredible efficiencies beyond just the consumption of fuel or other things. So, but I just point back to that, the things that we hear about, they've been worked on long before we've heard about them, and if there was an efficient, effective piece of equipment, it'd be in the field working today. And today we have to deal with what's available today, and always look to tomorrow. But with that, I'll end my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Pacheco Warner.
Thank you, Chair. And, I think, Samir, to your question about when the board is interested, I think, there is interest now, at least Dr. Sheriffs and I think not for me, not because I want to push the technology, but because there is so much coming in terms of regulations, in terms of electrification, guidelines that are coming. And I think if we don't get ahead of the game now and start piloting some of these sooner rather than later, and by sooner, I really mean, at least in the next 12 months, we're going to be playing catch up on some of this. And so for that reason, I think the time is really now piloting, to start piloting this. And I would say that, we've got to take a global approach when we're thinking about how these things are being in use now, because it's not just the United States, it's globally. And so really thinking about and learning from wherever the technology is being used and how it's being used is important. And I would say that to the cost, it is so important for us when we hear back from you to understand the cost, not just from a startup perspective, but from the whole life cycle of a tractor, to really understand what we're estimating here are going to be the costs. Just because we also want to make sure that we understand the maintenance costs, which may be higher. And so we have to think about, how to advocate from a state and federal level for incentive dollars for maintenance. So I don't know. So we don't know this information, but that's why it's important to take a look at it and not play catch up as some of these regulations start coming down. Thank you.
Chairman, if I could just, and I see that Councilmember Lewis is speaking, but I want to clarify some things. Maybe it might help the discussion. I'm not sure if Councilmember, your comments are related to this discussion, but just a quick clarification. You know, what we're recommending is actually we're not going to wait at all on the electric tractor research and priority and discussion. In fact, that's why we put it on in our presentation. You know, that we want to streamline that process. We want to make it a priority. And we're actually actively looking for pilot projects right now. And that's a message that we've had with our, you know, so that we can actually gather better data. Now, in terms of committing to a time frame to coming back, that is entirely up to the board. It could be 6 months, it could be 2 months, it could be a year, it could be whatever. But I can tell you, as we continue to do, you know, this program is absolutely cutting edge, far beyond what any other area, not only within the state does, anywhere in the world is doing right now. So I think, you know, any misimpression, you know, that this program, that we're not looking for these technologies or actively looking for these pilots or anything along those lines. I want to make sure those are put to rest, you know, that's exactly what we're recommending today. And we're more than happy to come back and report, you know, within a 6-month time frame or a 1-year time frame. That's not an issue at all. I just want to be clear, you know, that the recommendation in front of you to accept this funding because of the piloting that we've already done and all the hard work that we've done. That's the main recommendation in front of you, but embedded within it is an absolute priority for the latest technology, including, for example, electric tractors. It is very early. We have not seen those in significant ways yet, but I think that it is a very big opportunity for the Valley to look at those and to really work with the farmers to test those technologies. There could actually be enough savings where the incentive level is just where it needs to be, right? So these are questions that we have to be very thoughtful about. I think as we look at costs and then we look at all of these issues, and that's why we're absolutely happy to take, you know, even today with board direction, just the conversation alone continues to further what's already been the board's priority on looking at these technologies. And I'd be surprised if we're not back within 6 months talking to the board about this program, because it's about as often as we come back with, you know, it's a very active, very high priority for this board. And we're consistently, as we did today, by the way, coming back to you with ideas and recommendations for how to make that happen. So that's it. I'm not sure it needs to be in the motion. I think board direction is clear on this. It's consistent with prior board direction, but we're happy to, you know, again, keep furthering that conversation just based on the board direction today.
Thank you for the clarification. Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think we lost your audio, Councilmember Lewis. It doesn't appear that you're on mute, but it started out, but it no.
Go ahead.
We can come back if you want to try to work on it. I see that Supervisor Pereira has his hand or would like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'd like to make a motion if that's all right. And I'd like to move staff recommendation with the addition of a third category of 101 to 500 acres at 70%.
Supervisor Rick, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Supervisor Lewis, it appears that your audio's not working. So okay. No. Okay, so with that, we have a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Mr. Couch? He has stepped out. Ms. Fugazi?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis? Her hand is raised. Mr. Mendez?
Aye.
Dr. Pacheco-Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Aye.
Mr. Rickman,
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff,
Yes.
Ms. Shucklin.
Aye.
I believe that was a yes. Mr. Reyes,
Aye.
motion passes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
And
Chair,
item number
can you hear
11,
me now?
yes, Ms. Lewis, we
Yes.
can actually hear you
Okay.
now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And item number 10, receive and file district's annual air toxics report for 2021.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Brian Clements, your Permit Services Director, and I'll be going over the District 2021 Annual Air Toxics Report. Leading in with a little background on air toxics first, the state and federal governments have identified over 700 compounds that, when suspended in the air, can end up in your body and cause risk to your health. The federal government calls them hazardous air pollutants, and the state calls them toxic air contaminants, but either way, they're all air toxics. The impacts to human health can be varied, but we're talking about impacts like cancer or other long-term chronic health impacts, or short-term acute health impacts. Some of the more common air toxics that you might have heard about are things like diesel exhaust particulate matter, benzene, or asbestos. These pollutants are not the same as the criteria pollutants, those for which EPA has established national ambient air quality standards, like nitrogen oxides and fine particulate matter, or PM 2.5. But it's important to understand that small quantities of air toxics are distributed throughout the air that we breathe, and they get created by a variety of sources, from cars and trucks to industrial operations and consumer products. To address air toxics, the district runs an integrated air toxics program, combining local, state, and federal requirements under one umbrella. We implement a state law called Air Toxics Hotspots that addresses health risks from air toxics from existing operations in the valley. We evaluate new and modified sources of air toxics as well, to make sure that we don't allow new health risks situations to be created from these new emissions. We also implement a large number of regulations designed to reduce risk from air toxics on a regional basis. And we assist land use agencies to address and mitigate potential air toxics risks from new development projects under CEQA. Through these efforts and other efforts to reduce air toxics in the valley, there has been a major reduction in cancer risk from breathing air in the valley since 1990. One such indicator of that is the benzene emissions trend in the valley, as shown here on this graph. Over the years, benzene emissions have been reduced by 90% when compared to previous levels. This information here in particular is based on samples and data collected at monitoring stations here in the valley, supporting actual health benefits to the valley public. I'll touch on our integrated air toxics program in a little more detail now, starting with the AB 2588 air hotspots program, which applies to existing sources. Under this state law, existing facilities are required to first submit a plan to quantify their air toxic emissions. And then after that plan is approved, they implement the plan and report their air toxics emissions. The district then performs prioritization, which is a conservative screening level health risk assessment. The results of the prioritization put facilities in one of three categories: low, intermediate, or high priority. Low and intermediate priority facilities don't need further assessment at that time, but intermediate priority facilities are required to submit updated information every 4 years for reevaluation. High priority facilities require further assessment as they may create a health risk. To make that final determination, a more refined health risk assessment is required. Based on the results of that health risk assessment, high risk facilities would have to hold public meetings to inform the neighbors of the risk that they're creating. And the highest risk facilities have to reduce the risk they're creating by modifying facility operations to reduce emissions to the point where they're no longer that high risk. Implementation of the hotspots program began in the late 80s, and since then we have evaluated air toxics for thousands of facilities through that process I just described. As mentioned, intermediate and high priority facilities or risk facilities have continuing requirements under the program. That said, working with facilities to reduce emissions over the years, there are currently no high risk facilities identified under the hotspots program anywhere in the Valley. This slide provides an update on our recent work in the program. As we continue to reassess facilities in the Valley, we've rolled the assessments out through a phased approach with the number of facilities in each phase identified on the slide here under the first main bullet. Since 2016, we've completed reassessments for over 5,300 facilities with the results of that work summarized here as well. And that is over 4,400 are exempt from further assessment, and 762 are intermediate priority facilities. There were 85 high priority facilities that, through a health risk assessment, we were determined to be low or intermediate risk facilities. And there are currently 23 high priority facilities that are currently being evaluated through an HRA process. And again, any facilities categorized as intermediate or priority or risk have continuing requirements under the program. So the previous few slides were on hotspots, and that's all about existing sources. Regarding new equipment and new sources of emissions, we analyzed potential health risk of every single operation for which we are proposing to issue a permit. If that operation will emit any amount of toxics, we go through that process. And we also help lead agencies do the same thing under CEQA. We do this with a risk management review or an RMR, and this process is very similar to the prioritization screening and health risk assessment process I described for existing sources under hotspots. But for new sources, we utilize potential emissions since the equipment is not yet in operation. We perform this analysis for all proposed increases in toxic emissions, and very conservative worst case conditions are assumed in our models, such as the highest possible emissions, stagnant air conditions, and long-term exposure. Projects not passing this health risk assessment or RMR are not approved as proposed. In addition, best available control technology is required, minimizing emissions from the proposed new and modified sources. We also implement a large number of regulations that are aimed at specific types of facilities or operations to further reduce air toxic emissions in the Valley. The district is responsible for implementing through our permitting and inspection processes, local, state, and federal rules and regulations that reduce air toxics. The state regulations are called Air Toxic Control Measures, or ATCMs, and apply to a fairly wide variety of sources, with a few mentioned on this slide here. And the federal regulations are generally called MACT standards, which stands for Maximum Achievable Control Technology. There are about 150 of those MACT standards, from everything from aerospace coatings to wood preserving. The district also focuses on incentive grant programs that bring about reductions in NOx and PM, but also achieve collateral reductions in air toxics. The district has administered $4.2 billion towards clean air projects in the Valley, resulting in over 200,000 tons of emissions reduced. The most prominent example is the multitude of emissions reduction grant programs aimed at diesel engines. Whether we've been replacing or retrofitting trucks, tractors, buses, or ag irrigation engines, there have been over 29,000 diesel engines replaced, resulting in the reduction of 16,000 tons of diesel particulate matter emissions. While diesel particulate is the primary pollutant contributing to the Valley's cancer risk, we've seen a major reduction in diesel PM, over a 60% decrease in diesel PM emissions in the Valley through these efforts and other efforts mentioned. There is another front now related to emissions inventory and air toxics that came about through AB 617. One of the requirements in 617 is for the state to develop a uniform statewide system of annual reporting of criteria and toxic emissions. As a result, ARB created the CTR, which is a new regulation requiring this statewide enhanced reporting of facility stationary source emissions, including criteria and toxic emissions. The district will be implementing the requirements of the CTR for Valley facilities and sending compiled inventory data over to ARB. Emissions inventory data is critical to understanding emission sources and related health risks, and the CTR is another mechanism to assist with those efforts. Along the way, we've developed the district into a state national leader in modeling of air toxics. Both ARB and Region 9 of the EPA have designed classes that inform other air districts and consultants about the district's health risk assessment process and available tools. We've placed these tools on our website for all to access and use, including land use agencies that use these tools to make sure there's no significant risk being created by land use decisions under CEQA. And we've also developed streamlined emission reporting tools so that most facilities can report their criteria and toxic emissions simultaneously to the district. And we also work with communities in the San Joaquin Valley to ensure understanding of air toxics and to achieve reductions in air toxics emissions. We have an important role in helping businesses understand and comply with the many air toxic rules and requirements. We work directly with applicants who need assistance in reducing their potential air toxic impacts from new and modified sources. And we continue to expand our ability to assist land use agencies in the Valley to deal with air toxic impacts under CEQA. And finally, we continue to engage the public through community involvement as we implement our integrated air toxics program. And as mentioned, we'll continue to work with ARB and Valley facilities to implement the new enhanced CTR inventory reporting regulation. So with that, we ask your board to receive and file this year's annual air toxics report to the community and authorize staff to distribute the report as required and make it available to the public on our website. So that concludes the presentation, and I'll turn it back over for a discussion.
Okay, are there any governing board member comments before we go to public comment? So technically not an action item.
Yeah, it's a receive and file item, Mr. Chair. So technically a vote wouldn't be needed for it. I think as long as there's just the board accepts the report essentially today. But yeah, so no vote needed. But I think you can take board comments and public comments.
Okay. Any board comment? I don't see any indicated. Any public comment?
And again, there is no public member in the north and south. There's no public comment here in the central, and I do not see any on Zoom as well.
Okay, so we will receive and file. Thank you.
Item number 11 is verbal report on California Air Resources Board activities.
Yes, thank you. As you know, that there are still workshops happening around the rulemaking for advanced clean cars and advanced clean fleets. And so I do encourage you to, both the board and the public, to look at those workshop calendars and see, as this is going to be a really significant rulemaking process that starts this summer and concludes in the late fall, early winter, on the mobile sources that we've been talking about are so critical to our reductions. I do also want to point out that there will be a workshop on dairy and livestock methane and renewable natural gas in California, and that will be on March 29th from 9 to 5 p.m. And again, and it will be a virtual meeting, so again, if you are interested in that, please look that up on the CARB website. Again, the title of the workshop is CARB Workshop on Dairy and Livestock Methane and Renewable Natural Gas in California. And really hoping to hear from local folks to provide their expertise on this piece as well. And as this issue is probably most germane to the folks in the San Joaquin Valley. And as always, please continue to feel free to reach out to me or engage on any CARB-related matters, and I'll do my best and continue to represent San Joaquin Valley. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 12, Executive Director APCO comments.
Thank you. The Chair, board members, I had a few things today, a little bit more than I might normally have. Just wanted to go through a couple of things. First, I wanted to just let you all know that Dr. Pacheco Warner was announced as a Woman of the Year for Assemblymember Arambula's district. I just wanted to congratulate her and note that and thank her for her ongoing diligence and hard work in representing the Valley at the CARB board meeting here on the district board. So just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. And we will be participating, by the way, in the workshop that she had mentioned on the livestock issues. We were asked to be a part of a panel, and we'll be supporting that process along with other agencies that are also involved in working with dairies on the variety of issues there. Wanted to also let you know we're hoping to be able to host a governing board study session in the fall. We're looking at October right now as our potential date, just kind of looking at different calendars and where we are now. And I say hoping because obviously everybody, I think, is still hoping for the best as we continue, emerging from COVID and doing planning for something like this. I wanted to put that out there just as an early heads up on that, and more information will be forthcoming as we try to work those details out. I also wanted to let you know that there is a summit related to the alternatives to open burning and the phase out process that we're going through right now. It's planned for May 17th and 18th. And so there will be more information posted on the summit, save the date, and other related information that we'll make available. We'll share it with the board, and it'll be available on our website. It's something that's being planned in coordination with CARB and with a number of different stakeholders to basically showcase the work that's going on right now with the phase out, talk about different challenges, highlight some of the new technology and equipment that's being used, and continue to talk next steps. So that's something that we're very happy to support, and we'll be a part of that. I also wanted to let you know, just for awareness, there is a bill that was introduced recently, AB 2550. It's a spot bill, and it has to do with oversight with respect to air quality. It's something that we're interested in finding more about. We've reached out to Assemblymember Arambula, who's the author of the bill, to hopefully get some more clarification and information. And we also provide some information to help with whatever the issues may be that is trying to be addressed by this bill. Obviously, we have a long history of working on air quality plans, as you heard earlier, with the California Air Resources Board. You heard from EPA. Extensive work that's being done in the Valley through strong action by the board in partnership with our state and federal partners. So it'd be great for that information and whatever we could do to help provide education and support and then put on the table essentially what we need in the Valley, which is continued funding, continued action on mobile sources, a number of asks that the board has put together in the form of the legislative platform, policy platform. So we're happy to continue engaging, and just wanted to make sure you were aware of that bill, and we'll provide updates as that develops. And yes.
Do you know nothing of what's in that bill?
We've heard, we've got early information about what's in that bill, but we're actually trying to understand that at the moment. Yeah, it's not in print.
and said anything to you?
Yeah, we've been asking repeatedly to meet.
Oh, but he didn't reach out to you.
No, we have
Yeah.
not heard anything from the office on the bill.
I will hasten not to say any four-letter words. Thank you.
And the last part I wanted to mention, or last update on is I wanted to note that Mary Brody, who's over here by the door, this is actually her last board meeting here as our Director of Administrative Services. I wanted to recognize her and thank her for her years of supporting the Air District, creating the best finance team in the universe. Her team is, as you've heard, through the budget process, through the awards that we get, through the GFOA process for financial reporting. They do a lot of great work. All the grant programs that we're talking about earlier, guess who processes all the claims and the checks, and you name it. They're just a tremendous team, and Mary's been at the leadership of that team for many years now, and we're going to really, really miss her. We're going through a process in terms of recruiting and making sure that we fill those really big, really big position shoes. And just wanted to let the board know that this is her last meeting and recognize her and thank her. And I don't know if you want to say a couple of things real quick, Mary.
Before she starts, that's overruled. So just don't even give it.
You heard it.
Well, thank you so much, Samir, for the kind words, and your board for all the support over these years. I have been very fortunate and blessed to have been supported and leaded by your board and the wonderful management team that works hard every single day. So I've had a great team that supported me, of course. Takes a village to raise a child, his whole hardworking team and your leadership to run the district. It's significant work. It has real impact on the life and quality of life and the health of everyone in the Valley. And I'm just very honored and proud to have been part of it for 11 and a half years. So thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations on your retirement. I wish you well in that.
Much too young to leave
So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my comments. If you wanted to move on with the agenda.
Sure. Thank you. And that brings us to governing board member comments.
Yes, item number 13.
Okay. Vice Mayor Fugazi.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple comments. I didn't chime in during the meeting, but I definitely wanted to recognize Administrator Guzman being at our meeting, and also the fact that she took time to come to Stockton. She met with more than a half a dozen of our community groups and discussing the challenges. I mean, we have immense challenges throughout the Valley, and also hearing from Aaron of CARB regarding our partnerships in order to create equitable access for our underserved communities. So I know that there's this strong partnership with our ag programs, and near and dear to my heart are our tune-in and tune-up programs, Drive Clean in the San Joaquin, Clean Cars for All. We just had an event on March 5th, and we had just under 400 cars. We had more than 150 lined up before 6:30 in the morning. So this program is still very important. And what was interesting is we had other community groups, as always, at our event, and we had some of the electric lawnmowers out there, and we had people stop immediately. Hey, how do I get one of those? So there is interest in our community. I think Mr. Molina's point, bringing up e-bikes, we should have e-bikes at those events. We do have our dealerships that are part of our Drive Clean in the San Joaquin program there. But I also would advocate for more funding for that. I think that we should be pushing this program to as many people in our community as possible. And if we can get more funding for it, I think that we definitely need to advocate for that, because we have people line up. And if I just look at the numbers, 361 vouchers were given out at that event. And I said 396 vehicles. And some of them were turned away, though, because it has been within a year and they were asking for another voucher. And then on top of that, there were people that arrived late. But guess what? They still didn't miss out on the opportunity. While they couldn't have gotten the emission test there, we gave them the 800 number and they were able to call and get a voucher over the phone. So I just think that this is really important. I would love if our, if CARB's listening, hello CARB, if we could get some more funding for this, for these programs, I would really, really love that, because we have, like I said, the most disadvantaged communities right here in the Central Valley. And the more we can do in order to assist in these efforts, the better. But thank you. I also want to recognize up here in the north, we have John. This is his last meeting. He is retiring. So we can't pan over. John maybe can walk into the camera. But thank you for your service to the Air District. You've been here for 30
decades. 31, almost 32 years.
32 years serving at the district. So thank you so much for that. And we have Mark now who's joining us. And don't worry, we're going to run you through the ringer up here. So, okay. Anyway, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Vice Chair Chiesa.
That was a very nice thing you just did. I really appreciate it. So a couple of things. Dr. Pacheco-Warner, you said you're going to try and represent us. I think you're doing a great job at CARB. Keep it up. We're here to support you. If you need help, you need us to show up at meetings. I just wanted to report out that I went on a tour with Samir and some of the staff to the air collection site down in Turlock. Another great education for me, just in how the process works, the whole air quality component. It was really good. I've asked Samir to come to our board and do a presentation. I think the message, we just don't talk about it enough, about how much has been done. I know we've got a long ways to go, but there's a good message out there. So I've asked him to do that, and my board, I have to set that up with you, Samir. I know I talked to my board about it. I want you to know right here, most fun I've had in a year and a half sitting here in the north, three of us here. It's been a lot of fun. And I also want to thank Samir for the barbecue van that's outside making our lunch. So we're going to be like Central California. To John, a big appreciation to John. I said this at retirement, but I probably still wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for him. This is a very difficult assignment, and I know it takes a long time. Most of you have been sitting on this board a long time. It takes a long time to catch on, and I've had my own personal tutor who's now leaving. But much appreciation again from myself to you. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Rickman.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I took my hand down. Councilmember Fugazi, checked all the boxes, and I just wanted to say in that tune in and tune up free repair event in Stockton, how efficient and smooth everything was. I mean, the staff did a heck of a job. So thank everybody that was involved. It's a great event, and look forward to the next one. So thank you, everyone.
Okay, great to hear. Thanks for the comments. And Councilmember Lewis.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me this time.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. First thing I want to say is barbecue man, the barbecue man. Okay, I didn't know the barbecue man was going to be there. Otherwise, if I'd known I was going to have these computer problems today, I would be sitting in the Modesto office. So enjoy everybody who's sitting there today. Just a couple of comments in regards to the Clean Air event in Stockton. It's good to hear that there were over 400 participants there. I think it's a good time for us to start ramping up those events in various cities, especially in light of the cost of gas. I know that I got a call this morning from someone who's interested in moving into an electric car, whether it be new or used. So, getting out that information to our community is really important. So I really support those events, and I'm glad that Stockton had a successful one here recently. I didn't have the opportunity to comment on item number 9, and if I may just say kind of my piece on that. I really appreciate what our staff has been doing to keep us on board, to look at what's offered for the future. But what was before us was money for our small farmers and what was on the agenda. And sometimes there's a tendency to want to leapfrog forward to something that is not in our grasp right now, or, you know, in my opinion, kind of pushing our farmers off the cliff. And I really don't want to see that happen. You know, these things have to be done incrementally. They have to be done in consideration of the farmers who are providing food for our community, for our country, and for the world. And despite the fact that, you know, a lot of people are looking at how we're going to move into global green, there are many countries out there that really don't give a rat's eye about global greenness. So I think we've done a really good job here in the Central Valley of working towards being green, but we also have to be mindful of the people that we're serving and the people that have to spend their hard-earned dollars to try to keep up with this technology, not to push them off the cliff or not to leapfrog too far forward, so that you know, it puts them in a position of thinking, well, why should I even try this? You know, because now I've got to go into this new category and we haven't even finished doing the research there. So thank you, Samir. Thank you to our staff for all the hard work that you do. And we're here to help one another, not to push anybody off the cliff. And I think our staff is doing a great job, and I appreciate the board holding fast and making sure that we stay on task. And that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Vice Chair, did you have another comment?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
I forgot Anne Marie is also, she's not retiring, but she's going to San Luis Obispo, right? San Luis, come on up here. Just have to acknowledge again, when you're in the north, you take care of things. Anne Marie, come here for a second. Again, another important, when you're up in the north by yourself, or a couple of us, this is the first time we've had three, they take care of you unbelievably. So again, we wish you the best in your non-retirement and your move to new transition. That's it. So again, a great service to this organization. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I gratuitously sneak in here on something, if you wouldn't mind? First, I think I speak for all of us in looking with some envy and some, you know, just joy, just seeing how much fun you're having up in the north. It's just amazing to see everybody back up there, and absolutely, Anne Marie, John, you know, we've done a lot of celebration, and it says so much about the star work culture for the board members to just do that wonderful recognition of those two awesome managers, you know, and you met Mark up there too, the new manager. He's going to be great. So thank you so much to the North for that. And it reminded me of something actually in my updates I had forgotten. That's why I said gratuitously, because we're actually celebrating our 30th anniversary this year, the 30-year anniversary of the district's operation, you know, and I wanted to just first give you a heads up about that, but also let you know that as we talk about the history of the district and all the accomplishments, but all the hard work that's still to come, in June, when we come back with our annual report to the community, we're going to be embedding, you know, that as part of the theme of that report. So you're going to see stories and call outs and you know, interesting facts around the 30 years that we've been operating as a unified air pollution control district. It came out of state law, and there's going to be some really interesting history to discuss. And I just want to put one little factoid out there, just to show you kind of what, you know, where we were and where we are today. In 1992-93, our budget was $12.5 million, including a really small amount of you know, pass-through funds. This year's current budget is $583,894,000, including 90% grants that we offer through the programs that you just heard about, like the farmer program. So this board has come a long way in doing many, many great things over these past 30 years. And I just wanted to close on that note and let you know that there'll be more to come on discussing and commemorating the great work of this board and implementing our vision and mission and cleaning the air for all Valley residents and improving public health and quality of life. So I just wanted to end on that note and thank the board for all the hard work that you do.
Okay, thank you for sharing those comments. And I, again, want to thank the staff in all regions for their diligence in providing the board with the information that they do. Thank the board for their thoughtful comments and deliberations today, and especially the public for engaging in the process. And so with that, we are adjourned.